The Forgotten Reel. Greetings, dear listeners. I am Miss Evelyn, now in my 60s, but once a curious young woman who stumbled upon a mystery that changed my life. This tale is not one of whimsy or joy, but of shadows that linger long after the lights go out. It's a story of a forgotten film reel, a cursed artifact that brought terror into my quiet world. What you're about to hear is a warning, a lesson wrapped in fear and regret. Over 40 years ago, I found something that should have stayed buried. A reel that carried more than images, a reel that carried a presence. Let me take you back to 1983, to a small coastal town called Greyhaven, where I uncovered the horror of the forgotten reel. The attic of my great-uncle's seaside cottage was a maze of dust and memories. He had passed away the previous month, leaving behind a cluttered home filled with relics of his life as a projectionist at Greyhaven's old cinema, the Starlight. I was 22, tasked with sorting through his belongings before the cottage was sold. The air was heavy with the scent of salt and mildew, and the floorboards creaked under my weight as I navigated stacks of old posters, broken projectors, and crates of forgotten film cans. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just trying to make sense of the chaos. That's when I found it, a small dented film canister tucked behind a pile of moldy magazines. The label was handwritten, the ink faded, but legible, The Tide's Lament. No studio name, no release date, just a single phrase scrawled in red ink beneath the title. Watch carefully, it sees you. I chuckled, assuming it was some obscure B-movie my great-uncle had kept for nostalgia. The Starlight had been known for showing oddities, films that never made it to mainstream theaters. I decided to take the canister home, curious to see what kind of forgotten gem I'd unearth. My apartment was small, but I had an old 16mm projector I'd salvaged from my great-uncle's collection. That night, I set it up in my living room, dimmed the lights, and threaded the reel. The projector whirred to life, casting flickering light across the walls. The opening scene was familiar in a way. A young woman, Clara, stood on a stormy beach, her dress whipping in the wind. She held a small dog, a scruffy terrier named Pip. The music was haunting, a low violin that set my nerves on edge. It felt like a classic melodrama, but something was off. The colors were too vivid, the sea too dark, almost black. Clara's eyes were wrong, too large, too shadowed, like they held secrets the camera couldn't capture. When Clara spoke, her voice sent a chill through me. "Hi, Pete, we were never on this shore," she said, her tone flat, almost accusing. I frowned. That wasn't a line I'd expect from a film like this. It felt personal, as if she were speaking to me. I shook my head, telling myself it was just an artsy choice. But then the lighthouse keeper appeared, a tall man with a weathered face. On his forehead was a mark, a dark, swirling symbol that pulsed like a heartbeat. My stomach twisted. I tried to stop the projector, but the lever wouldn't budge. The screen flickered, and Clara turned, her gaze locking onto the camera, onto me. She smiled. Not a warm smile, but one that stretched too wide, her eyes glinting with something unnatural. "You shouldn't have watched," she whispered, her voice cutting through the projector's hum. I yanked the plug from the wall, and the room plunged into darkness. My heart pounded, my hands trembling. What was that? A prank. A distorted copy? But the air in my apartment felt heavier, the shadows deeper. I wasn't alone. The next morning, I tried to dismiss it as a vivid imagination. I'd always been sensitive, prone to overthinking. But when I rewatched a different film, a romance I'd seen a dozen times, I noticed something chilling. The lighthouse keeper's mark was there on the forehead of the lead actor. Had it always been? I couldn't remember. My mind felt foggy, like I was trying to grasp a memory that kept slipping away. I called my friend Lily, a film buff who worked at the local library. "Have you ever heard of The Tide's Lament?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Nope," she said, her tone curious. "Sounds like one of those old indie films. Where'd you get it?" "My great-uncle's attic. It's weird. The main character says things that don't make sense, and there's this mark on the lighthouse keeper's face." Lily laughed, but it was nervous. "A third? That's creepy. Bring it over. Let's watch it together." I hesitated. The thought of watching it again made my skin crawl, but I needed someone else to see it, to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. That evening, I brought the reel to Lily's place. We set up her projector, and as the film began, I braced myself. The opening was the same, Claire on the beach, Pip in her arms. But this time, the line was different. "Pip, we were never on this shore," she said again, but her voice was lower, almost a growl. Lily gasped, her hand gripping my arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. I nodded, my throat dry. The lighthouse keeper appeared, his mark more pronounced, pulsing like a living thing. The screen flickered and Clara turned to the camera, her eyes black as ink. "Evelyn," she said, her voice clear and sharp. I froze. Lily's nails dug into my arm. "Did she just say your name?" I don't know," I stammered, but I knew she had. The room felt colder, the shadows stretching across the walls like claws. The projector kept running, even as I tried to shut it off. Clara's smile widened, and the lighthouse keeper stepped closer, his mark glowing faintly. "We see you," he said, his voice echoing in my skull. Lily screamed, and I yanked the reel from the projector, snapping the film. The room went silent, but the weight of their gazes lingered. Lily was pale, her eyes wide. "What the hell was that, Evelyn?" "I don't know," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But I think it's alive." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of my apartment made me jump. Every shadow seemed to move. Around 2 a.m. I heard it, a faint whisper, like wind through the reeds. "Evelyn," it said, soft but unmistakable. I sat up, my heart racing, but my apartment was empty. The reel sat on my coffee table, its canister glinting in the moonlight. The whispers continued over the next few days, growing louder, more insistent. "Clara, Pete." They came from nowhere and everywhere, sometimes sounding like my great-uncle's voice, sometimes like strangers. I started seeing things too. Flashes of Clara's face in mirrors, the lighthouse keeper's silhouette in the corner of my eye. One night, I woke to the sound of static. My TV was on, though I hadn't touched it. The screen showed Clara standing on a desolate beach, her dress torn, her eyes hollow. She raised a hand and waved, slow and deliberate. "Come closer, Evelyn," she said, her voice distorted, like it was underwater. I screamed, yanking the TV's plug from the wall. But when I checked the next morning, the reel was back in its canister, as if I'd never touched it. I'd thrown it in the trash the day before. Desperate for answers, I dove into research. Greyhaven's library had archives of old newspapers, and I found a brief mention of The Tide's Lament. It was a low-budget film shot in 1940, abandoned after strange incidents on set. Actors forgot lines, props vanished, and a young actress named Margaret had disappeared during filming. No records of her remain, no photos, no contracts, just rumors of a curse. I contacted Mr. Hargrove, a retired projectionist who'd worked with my great-uncle. He agreed to meet me at a diner, his hands trembling as he sipped his coffee. "That film," he said, his voice low. "It's not right. Your uncle found it in the theater's basement back in '53. He watched it once and never spoke of it again. Said it made him feel like he was being watched." "Did he say anything about Margaret?" I asked. Hargrove's eyes darkened. "She was real, but after she vanished, it was like she'd never existed. The studio erased her. Some say her spirit's trapped in the film, caught in the frames. I felt a chill. Trapped. How? He leaned closer. Some films, they're more than pictures. They hold things that don't belong in our world. I couldn't let it go. I drove to the old Starlight Cinema, now a crumbling ruin on the edge of town. The doors were boarded up, but I pried one open and slipped inside. The air was thick with dust, the seats covered in mold. In the projection booth, I found a dusty journal, its pages filled with my great-uncle's handwriting. He'd written about the Tide's Lament, describing strange visions after watching it. Clara's face in his dreams, whispers in the dark. One entry read, "She's still here. Margaret, she wants out." My phone buzzed, startling me. It was an unknown number. "Don't watch it again," a woman's voice said before the line went dead. My hands shook as I pocketed the phone, the journal clutched to my chest. Back home, I showed the journal to Lily. She was skeptical, but agreed to help. We contacted a film restoration expert, Miss Carter, who specialized in old reels. She examined the canister, her face pale. "There's a hidden frame," she said after days of analysis. "It's not part of the original film. It shows a woman, not Clara, starving, terrified. And there's text. Help me, I'm still here." That night, the whispers grew unbearable. They called my name, begged me to watch. I locked the reel in a drawer, but at 3 a.m., the projector whirred to life. The screen showed the lighthouse keeper, his mark pulsing. His mask began to shift, revealing a rotting face beneath, Margaret's face, her eyes pleading. "Evelyn," she whispered, "free me." I screamed, unplugging the projector. But the reel was out of the drawer, back in the machine. I couldn't escape it. I knew I had to face it. Miss Carter introduced me to Agnes, a local woman who knew the old ways. She taught me a ritual to break the curse using salt and blessed candles. "Margaret's soul is trapped," Agnes said. "You must confront her, or she'll never let you go." That night, in the Starlight's projection booth, I set up the ritual. Salt circled the projector, candles flickering in the dark. I played the reel, my heart pounding. Clara appeared, her eyes black voids. "You shouldn't have watched," she said, her voice echoing. "I'm here to free Margaret," I said, my voice trembling but firm. The screen flickered, and Margaret appeared, her face gaunt, her eyes pleading. "Help me," she whispered. I chanted the words Agnes taught me, the candles flaring. The air grew heavy, the whispers rising to a scream. Clara's image twisted, her smile contorting into a snarl. The lighthouse keeper stepped forward, his mark glowing. "You can't have her," he growled. But I didn't stop. I poured salt onto the reel, the film sizzling as if burned. Margaret's image flickered, then stabilized. "Thank you," she whispered, her form fading. The screen went black and the whispers stopped. The next morning, I burned the reel in a fire pit behind my apartment. It didn't resist, the flames consuming it until nothing remained but ash. Miss Carter called, confirming the hidden frame was gone from her scan. The Starlight was demolished soon after, the land cleared for a new development. But the fear lingered. Sometimes at night, I'd hear a faint whisper, a flicker of Clara's face in a mirror. I never watched the Tide's Lament again, but I kept Agnes's salt and candles, just in case. Years passed. I married, had 2 daughters, and settled in Greyhaven. I never told my children about the real, but I taught them to be cautious, to respect the unknown. Lily moved away, but we stayed in touch, her laughter a reminder of the bond we forged in fear. This is my story, dear listeners, a tale of curiosity and consequence. The reel was a trap, a vessel for a lost soul, and I was nearly caught in its grasp. Some things are better left unseen, untouched. If you ever find a film marked with strange warnings, don't watch it. Trust me, it sees you back. Be brave, but be wise. Protect your loved ones and never invite the shadows in. I am Miss Evelyn, and I hope my story guides you to tread carefully in the dark. Last Judgment. In the quiet town of Willow Creek, where the streets were lined with ancient oaks and the houses whispered secrets of the past, there lived a young protagonist, Alex, whose life was about to unravel into a nightmare. The story begins in the attic of Alex's family home, a place where memories were stored but rarely revisited. The attic, with its creaky wooden floor and dim light filtering through dusty windows, was a sanctuary of forgotten times. But on this particular afternoon, it became the gateway to a horror beyond comprehension. Among the trunks and old furniture, Alex found an unlabeled VHS tape, its surface coated with a layer of dust that seemed to cling to it like a warning. Intrigued, Alex took it downstairs, the tape clutched tightly in trembling hand. The VHS player, a relic of the past, hummed to life, casting a grainy image onto the screen. The footage was of a sunny afternoon, the camera shaky, but capturing the joy of two brothers, Alex and Lucas, engaged in a fierce gladiator game with wooden sticks. The video showed the boys laughing, their shouts of "I'm Spartacus" echoing in the backyard. Their grandfather filmed them, his voice heard occasionally, encouraging their play. But as the game reached its climax, the footage took a dark turn. Alex, then just a child, raised his hand, not in a thumbs down, as the brothers had agreed, but in a thumbs up. The screen glitched, and Lucas fell to the ground, lifeless. The camera shook as their grandfather gasped, and a shadow loomed behind Alex, a presence that made the blood run cold. The tape ended abruptly, leaving Alex in a silence that was quickly shattered by a low, persistent scratching at the bedroom door. It was a sound that sent chills down the spine, like fingernails on wood, relentless and ominous. The scratching stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving behind an unsettling stillness. Determined to uncover the truth, Alex delved into research, discovering an ancient Roman misconception. A thumbs up, not down, signaled death in the Colosseum. This led to the legend of the Last Judgment, a curse where forgotten executions could awaken the dead. As night fell, shadows in the house moved of their own accord, and reflections in the mirror seemed to twist into malevolent grins. The presence of something evil was undeniable. Alex's mother, Mrs. Carter, was a woman of stoic silence, her eyes clouded with a grief she refused to acknowledge. She denied Lucas's existence, her denial so fierce it was almost palpable. Yet, in the attic, Alex found a newspaper clipping, a missing person report with Lucas's name. The truth was beginning to surface, though the past seemed to be erasing Lucas, his face fading from photographs like sand in the wind. One midnight, the knocking in the walls grew louder, a rhythmic pounding that echoed through the house. Alex's phone blared to life, the video on repeat, the shadow closer each time. The bedroom door creaked open, and footsteps echoed down the hall, heavy and deliberate. A whisper, low and raspy, called out Alex's name, drawing them to a door that had not been there before. Behind the locked door lay a room frozen in time, Lucas's bedroom. The bed bore the imprint of a child who had long since vanished. A toy sword lay on the floor, and clothes were neatly arranged, waiting for a return that never came. On the desk, a note in childish handwriting read, "I remember now." The words were a chill, a message from beyond the grave. In the attic, Alex found an old sword, its blade stained with something dark, a reminder of a choice made years ago. Whispers echoed, "You chose this," as the mirror reflected a grin that was not Alex's. The line between reality and madness blurred, paranoia gripping Alex like a vice. As the days passed, the occurrences grew more intense. The family cat, once playful, now watched with unblinking eyes, its presence a silent warning. Friends from childhood reached out, their voices trembling as they recalled a third player in their games, a boy no one remembered. Then a text arrived. "Come outside. Let's play." Stepping into the night, Alex faced Lucas, who stood pale and smiling, his eyes black as coal. Behind him, shadowy figures shifted, waiting. Lucas raised his hand, a thumbs up, and the world went black. In the final twist, Alex remembered the forgotten friend, the third gladiator erased from memory. The game was real, the choice irreversible. As the shadows closed in, Lucas whispered, "Now it is your turn," and the screen faded to black. Thus, the curse of the Last Judgment was complete, a tale where the past and present collided, and the choices of childhood doomed the living to an eternal game of life and death. The attic was a place where time seemed to stand still, its air thick with the scent of aged cardboard and forgotten memories. The faint creak of the wooden floor beneath my feet echoed through the quiet space, a reminder of the years that had passed since anyone last ventured here. Dust motes swirled in the dim light, filtering through the grimy window, casting a golden hue over the scattered remnants of a bygone era. It was here, nestled between an old leather-bound trunk and a stack of yellowed newspapers, that I found it, the VHS tape. At first glance, it seemed out of place. While everything else in the attic bore the scars of time, the tape was untouched, its surface gleaming faintly despite a thin layer of dust. It was unlabeled, a simple black cassette with no markings to hint at its contents. But something about it drew me in, a curious pull that I couldn't ignore. I picked it up, the plastic cooled against my fingertips, and turned it over in my hands. Why was this tape hidden away so carefully? Back in my bedroom, the VCR hummed to life with a familiar whir, the screen flickering as the tape began to play. The footage was grainy, the colors faded, but the scene was unmistakable. There we were, Lucas and I, standing in the backyard, our wooden swords clutched tightly in our small fists. The sun was high, casting long shadows across the grass as we circled each other, our laughter echoing through the air. It was a game we played often, pretending to be gladiators in some grand arena, our imaginations running wild. But as the tape rolled on, a chill began to creep up my spine. Something felt off, a sense of unease settling in the pit of my stomach. I didn't remember this particular day, not clearly, but there was something about the way the camera moved, the way the light caught our faces, that didn't feel right. And then, at the end of the game, Lucas turned to me, his hand raised in a gesture I knew well, a thumbs up, a sign of victory. But as I watched, my own hand rose, not in celebration, but in judgment. My thumb turned downward, a movement so deliberate it made my breath catch. The screen glitched, a distorted ripple running through the image as Lucas froze, his smile faltering. Then, in an instant, he dropped to the ground, his body limp and lifeless. The camera shook violently, my grandfather's sharp intake of breath, audibles before the recording cut black. I sat in stunned silence, the remote still clutched in my hand, my heart pounding in my ears. But as the stillness of the room enveloped me, another sound broke through, the faint scratching at my bedroom door. It started softly, a light rake of nails against wood, but grew louder, more insistent. My breath hitched, my eyes darting towards the door as if expecting it to burst open at any moment. The scratching stopped abruptly, leaving behind an oppressive silence that was almost worse than the noise itself. In that moment, the shadow I had glimpsed in the video flashed in my mind, a dark form standing just behind me, unseen until it was too late. And with that thought, the world around me seemed to shift, the comfortable familiarity of my bedroom giving way to a creeping sense of dread. The legend was true, and I had just uncovered its deadly secret. The internet was a labyrinth of information, but I wasn't prepared for what I found. I sat at my desk, the glow of the screen casting an eerie light on my face. My fingers flew across the keyboard, typing words I barely believed. Thumbs up, death gladiators. The first article I opened was from a history website. I scrolled past the introduction, my eyes stopping at a bolded section. The thumbs up misconception. According to the article, most people believed a thumbs down meant death in the Colosseum, but that was a modern myth. The truth was the opposite. A thumbs up meant execution, while a thumbs down meant mercy. The article cited ancient texts, but I didn't care about the sources. All I cared about was the cold dread crawling up my spine. I kept reading, clicking on one link after another. The more I read, the more I realized how deep this misconception went. Films, books, even teachers had gotten it wrong. But why? And why did it matter now? Then I found it, a page titled The Curse of the Last Judgment. It wasn't from a reputable site. It looked like a blog written by someone obsessed with ancient legends. But the words leaped off the screen. In ancient Rome, when a gladiator was sentenced to death, the crowd would signal their fate with a thumbs up or down. But there was another tradition, one never spoken of in history books, the forgotten execution. If a gladiator was killed without the proper rituals, their spirit was doomed to wander, trapped between worlds. And if someone, unwittingly, remembers their execution, the dead can return. I pushed my chair back, the wooden legs scraping against the floor. The room felt colder, the shadows cast by the computer screen twisting into dark, alive shapes on the walls. I'd told myself it was just a legend, a silly superstition. But then I thought of the video, of Lucas, of the shadow behind me, and the scratching at my door. I closed the laptop, the sudden silence suffocating. My bedroom was dimly lit, only the faint moonlight peeking through the blinds. I tried to focus on my breathing, but my chest felt tight, as if something were pressing down on me. Then I saw it, a shadow. Not just any shadow, but one that didn't belong to anything in the room. It was tall, looming, and it moved when I wasn't looking. When I turned my head, it was gone. When I looked away, I could feel its presence. I stood up, my legs trembling. My dog, Max, a golden retriever who usually slept at the foot of my bed, was on high alert. His ears were perked up, and his eyes were fixed on something across the room. He growled low in his throat, a sound I'd never heard before. "Max, what's wrong?" I whispered, but he didn't look at me. He didn't stop growling. I took a step forward and the floor creaked under my foot. The sound was loud in the silence, and Max's growl turned into a whine. He backed away, his tail tucked between his legs. "Max, come here," I said. He was staring at the mirror on my dresser. I turned to look. My reflection stared back at me, but for a moment I could have sworn my reflection's eyes flickered, like a TV screen with bad reception. Then it was normal again, but I wasn't. I faced away from the mirror, my heart pounding. My phone buzzed on the desk, making me jump. It was a text from my best friend, Sarah. "Hey, you okay?" "You didn't answer my text earlier." I hesitated, then typed, "I'm fine. Just stressed with school stuff." I didn't tell her about the video, or Lucas, or the shadow, because if I did, she'd think I was crazy. But I wasn't crazy. I saw what I saw, and I felt what I felt. The scratching at my door started again. It was louder now, more insistent. Scratch, scratch. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Max whined again, his eyes still fixed on the mirror. I forced myself to move, to walk toward the door. My hand trembled as I reached for the knob, but before I could open it, the scratching stopped. The silence was worse. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. Then I heard my name. Emily, a voice whispered. It was low, raspy, and it seemed to come from all around me. I spun around, but I was alone. Max was gone. Emily? The voice came again. This time, it sounded closer. I grabbed my phone and ran out of the room, slamming the door behind me. The hallway was dark, the flickering light at the end making long shadows. I didn't stop running until I reached the living room. I turned on every light, chasing away the darkness, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. That something was watching me, waiting for me. And then I remembered. My grandfather had left behind more than just the VHS tape. In his attic, there was a journal. I didn't want to go back upstairs, but I had to. The attic was musty, the air thick with dust. I found the journal buried under a stack of old newspapers. It was leather-bound, the pages yellowed with age. I opened it, and the words on the first page made my blood run cold. "They're coming," my grandfather had written. "Because of the video. Because of the thumbs up. I tried to warn you, but you wouldn't listen. Now, it's too late. The dead don't forget." I slammed the journal shut, my hands shaking. But I couldn't stop reading. I flipped through the pages, the words blurring together. Lucas was never buried. He was never found. But he's here. He's always been here. I dropped the journal, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The scratches at my door had started again. This time, they were relentless. I ran downstairs, grabbing my phone on the way. I dialed Sarah's number, praying she'd answer. But it went straight to voicemail. "Sarah, it's me. You need to call me back. Something's happening. I think Lucas is coming back, and I don't think he's alone." I hung up, my hands trembling. The scratching stopped again, and the house fell into an eerie silence. I sat on the couch, waiting for morning, my eyes fixed on the stairs. And then I heard footsteps. Light, careful footsteps. Coming from upstairs. The voice whispered again, "Emily." This time, I knew I wasn't imagining it. And this time, I wasn't alone. The house felt heavy, as though the air itself was pressing against my skin. I had always known our old Victorian home was creaky, but now every groan of the wooden floorboards made me flinch. The shadows cast by the morning sun seemed to twist and writhe on the walls, like dark living things. My heart pounded as I walked downstairs, the newspaper clipping clutched in my trembling hand. The headline screamed at me, "Local boy disappears during family outing." No leads in sighting. I found my mother in the kitchen, her hands moving mechanically as she washed dishes, her eyes fixed on the sink. Steam curled up around her face, but she didn't seem to notice. The radio played softly in the background, a cheerful tune that felt out of place in the oppressive silence. "Mom," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't turn around. "Not now, honey. I'm busy." I stepped closer, the clipping crinkling in my hand. "We need to talk about Lucas." Her hands stopped. The water trickled, a steady drip, drip, drip that echoed through the room. "Lucas who?" she said, her voice flat, unnatural. "Don't lie to me." I slammed the clipping on the counter. Water splashed and she flinched but didn't look at me. "This is Lucas, my brother. Why are you pretending he never existed?" Her hands began moving again, scrubbing the same dish over and over. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice low and monotone. "You've always been an only child. You must have imagined him." "Imagined him?" I laughed, the sound sharp and desperate. "We grew up together. We fought, we played, Enough." She spun around, water dripping from her hands onto the floor. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, but there was something else there, something I couldn't quite place. Fear? Guilt? Or maybe something darker. "You're confused. You've always been prone to fantasies. Your grandfather filled your head with stories when you were a kid. Lucas isn't real." I shook my head, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. I remember him. I remember the way he used to laugh, the way he'd sneak into my room at night and scare me awake. I remember his birthday, his favorite toy, his smell. She turned back to the sink, her shoulders rigid. "You're imagining it. You have to let this go." I stared at her, my mind racing. What was she hiding? And why? I thought about the video, the shadow, the scratching at my door, the legend, the curse. It was all connected, wasn't it? Lucas' disappearance, the video, the shadow. Something was coming back, and my mother knew. I left the kitchen, my legs trembling. The house felt colder now, the air thick with secrets. I went to the living room and sat on the couch, flipping through old photo albums. But as I turned the pages, a chill ran down my spine. Lucas' face was fading. In one picture, he was standing beside me at the beach, his arms slung over my shoulders. Now his face was a blur, like someone had smudged him out with a wet finger. I kept flipping. In another photo, we were sitting on the porch steps, holding ice cream cones. Lucas' cone was melting, dripping down his hand, and he was grinning. But now his face was gone entirely, replaced by a pale, featureless oval. I slammed the album shut, my hands shaking. "Stop it," I muttered. "Stop playing tricks on me." But the tricks didn't stop. As I sat there, I heard the faint sound of footsteps upstairs. Light, cautious steps, as though someone was trying not to be heard. My heart leaped into my throat. I froze, listening. The footsteps stopped, then started again. They were coming from Lucas's room. I didn't remember standing up, but suddenly I was at the bottom of the stairs, my hands gripping the banister so hard my knuckles turned white. The scratching sound from my bedroom door had stopped, but now I heard something else, a low, muffled whimper. "Lucas," I called, my voice trembling. The whimper grew louder, and I recognized it. It was Max, our old family dog. He had died years ago, but now I could swear I heard his familiar whine. My breath came in short, sharp gasps as I climbed the stairs. At the top, I saw Max standing outside my bedroom door. But he was different. His fur was matted and gray, his eyes cloudy. He whimpered again, then turned and lumbered down the hall toward Lucas' room. I followed him, my legs heavy, as though I were walking through water. The door to Lucas's room was slightly ajar, and I could hear something inside, papers rustling, a faint thud. I pushed the door open, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Lucas' room was exactly as it had been the day he disappeared. The bed was made, the toys neatly arranged on the shelves. But in the center of the room, on the floor, was something that hadn't been there before, a small, weathered backpack. It was open, its contents spilling out. A water-stained notebook, a broken pencil, a faded toy sword. I knelt down, picking up the sword. It felt heavy, the plastic cracked and worn. As I turned it over in my hands, I heard a sound behind me. I spun around, but there was no one there. Then I heard it again, a faint whisper, soft and raspy. "Find me." I dropped the sword, my heart pounding. "Who's there?" I demanded, but there was no answer. Instead, the room seemed to grow darker, the shadows deepening. I could feel eyes on me, watching me. I scrambled to my feet and ran, slamming the door shut behind me. I didn't stop until I was back in my room, the door locked. I sat on the bed, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The scratching sound had started again, louder this time, more insistent. I pressed my hands against my ears, but I could still hear it. And then, faintly, I heard my grandfather's voice. "You shouldn't have looked." I lowered my hands. "Grandpa," I whispered. There was no answer. Instead, the scratching stopped. The room fell silent. I waited, my heart pounding, until I couldn't take it anymore. I turned on the TV, flipping through channels until I found a mindless talk show. I sat there, staring blankly at the screen, trying to convince myself that I was safe. But I wasn't safe, and I knew it. As the hours dragged on, the shadows in my room grew longer, darker. I could feel a presence in the house, something that didn't belong. And then, just as I was starting to relax, I heard it again, the sound of footsteps. This time, they were right outside my door. The clock on my nightstand read 12:07 a.m., its red digits glowing in the dark. I wasn't sure when I'd fallen asleep, but the silence of the house had been comforting, so much, so that I'd forgotten about the video, the shadow, the scratching at the door. For a moment, I'd let myself believe it was all just a nightmare. But then, the knocking started. Tap, tap, tap. At first, it was faint, like someone gently rapping their fingers against a wall. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The sound wasn't coming from outside my room. It was inside the walls. It echoed through the house, rhythmic and unrelenting. My heart pounded, my palms slick with sweat. I pulled the covers up to my neck, as if they could protect me. Tap, tap, tap. Louder now. Closer. The knocking seemed to be moving, circling the house like something alive. I strained my ears, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. Downstairs. Upstairs? It didn't matter. It was everywhere. Then, my phone buzzed. I hadn't charged it, but the screen lit up with an eerie blue light illuminating my dark room. My fingers trembled as I reached for it. No calls, no texts, just the video. Somehow, it was playing on repeat. The same grainy footage of Lucas and me in the backyard. My brother, so full of life, swinging his wooden sword. Me, younger, wilder, laughing. And then, the moment that made my blood run cold, I lifted my hand, thumbs down. But it wasn't what I remembered. The screen flickered, and for a second the shadow behind me seemed closer. Its edges were sharper now, more defined. I could almost make out a shape, tall, imposing, standing just over my shoulder. My grandfather's gasp echoed through the phone speaker, and I felt a chill run down my spine. The video ended abruptly, and the knocking stopped. The silence was worse. I sat there, frozen, my eyes fixed on the darkened screen. Then I heard it, a low creak, like the sound of a door hinge groaning under pressure. My bedroom door. Slowly it began to open. Creak. I wanted to scream, to run, to do something, but my body wouldn't move. My voice caught in my throat. The door swung open, and a sliver of moonlight cut through the darkness. Something or someone was on the other side. Footsteps. Light, cautious, like whoever it was didn't want to be heard. They paused just beyond the threshold. My heart raced. I could feel eyes on me, boring into my skin. Then, a whisper. "Hey." It was low, raspy, and unfamiliar, but it sent a shiver down my spine. The voice wasn't quite human. It had an edge to it, something sharp and unnatural. My breath hitched as the shadow in the hallway shifted, taking a step closer. I could see the faint outline of a hand gripping the doorframe, the fingers too long, too thin. "Who's there?" I forced the words out, my voice trembling. No answer. Instead, the footsteps moved closer. 1 step, 2 steps. I could see a figure now, tall and gaunt, standing just inside my room. Its face was obscured by the darkness, but I could sense its presence, a cold, unsettling energy that filled the space. And then it spoke again. "You." The single word sent a wave of dread through me. The figure raised a hand, and for a moment, I thought I saw something glint in the moonlight, a blade or maybe a claw. But before I could react, it stepped back, melting into the shadows as if it had never been there at all. The door creaked shut on its own, leaving me alone in the dark. My chest heaved, my heart pounding in my ears. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers shaking as I dialed the only number I could think of, my grandfather's. It rang, and rang, and rang. Finally, his voice answered, gravelly and tired. "Hello." "Grandpa," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's happening. Whatever you warned me about, it's happening." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then a heavy sigh. "I told you, kiddo. The legends are real. You need to be careful." "Careful? You're telling me to be careful? Lucas is back, and something else, something worse, is here too." Another pause. This time, longer. "I don't know what you're talking about, kid. Lucas? Don't lie to me." I snapped, my voice rising despite the fear. "I saw the video. I know what I did. And now, something's in my house." "Calm down," he said, his tone firm but gentle. "You need to stay calm. Whatever you're seeing, whatever you're hearing, it's playing tricks on your mind. You need to focus." "Focus? Are you kidding me? My bedroom door just opened by itself, and there's something in here with me? I'm not imagining it." "Listen to me," he said, his voice low and urgent. "You need to stay where you are. I'll come for you. Just stay on the line, okay?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Okay, I'll stay here." But as I sat there, my phone pressed to my ear. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The knocking had stopped, but the silence felt heavier now, oppressive. And then I heard it, another sound, this time coming from the hallway. Footsteps. Heavier this time, deliberate. Whatever was out there, it wasn't hiding anymore. My grandfather's voice was still on the line, talking, reassuring me, but I couldn't make out the words. All I could focus on was the sound of someone approaching my room. The door creaked open again, slowly, agonizingly slowly. And this time, I wasn't alone. "Grandpa," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "It's here. Stay on the line, kiddo. I'm almost there." But it was too late. The figure stepped into the room, its presence filling the space. I could see it now, tall, impossibly tall, with long fingers and eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. It wasn't Lucas. It wasn't human. And then, everything went black. The air in the house felt heavy, as if it had grown thicker overnight. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, even when I was alone. The knocking in the walls had stopped, but the silence was worse. It was the kind of quiet that made you strain to hear anything, only to be startled by the sound of your own breath. I had been searching for the house for days, poking into every corner, every closet, every nook and cranny. My grandfather's house was old, with creaking wooden floors and narrow hallways that seemed to shift in the dark. I had always known it was big, but now it felt endless, like a labyrinth designed to trap me. Then, I found it. At the end of the second floor, where the hallway seemed to dead end into a blank wall, I noticed something. The wallpaper didn't quite match. It was seamless, but if I pressed on it, it gave way, like a door hidden behind a painting. My heart pounded as I ran my fingers over the seam. It wasn't just my imagination. There was something here. I grabbed a screwdriver from the toolbox in the basement and wedged it into the narrow gap. With a loud creak, the wall swung open, revealing a door. It was old and rusted, with a keyhole in the center. I didn't need a key. The door wasn't locked. It was just waiting. The air on the other side was stale, like it had been trapped for years. I flicked on the flashlight on my phone, casting a weak beam of light into the darkness. The room was small, no bigger than a child's bedroom. But it wasn't just any room. It was Lucas's room. My breath caught in my throat as I stepped inside. Everything was exactly as it had been the day Lucas disappeared. The bed was made, the blankets pulled tight, but there was an indentation in the center, as if someone had just gotten up. A toy sword lay on the floor, its plastic blade gleaming faintly in the light. It was the same one we had used in our gladiator games. Against the far wall, a wardrobe stood with its door slightly ajar. Clothes spilled out, shirts and jeans, all in sizes too small for me. They were Lucas's clothes, laid out as if he might come back at any moment. But Lucas had been gone for 13 years. He wouldn't fit into those clothes anymore. Even if he were alive, he wouldn't be the same. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the room. There was a desk in the corner, covered in dust. On top of it, a piece of paper caught my attention. It was yellowed and folded, left behind like a note. My hands trembled as I picked it up. It was written in a child's handwriting, messy but familiar. I remember now. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't need to ask who had written it. I knew. It was Lucas. But Lucas had been gone for years. How could he have written this? And when? The room was silent, but I could feel the weight of something unseen pressing in around me. It felt wrong to touch it, like I was intruding on something private. As I turned to leave, I noticed something else. The bed. It wasn't just the indentation that caught my attention. There were photographs tacked to the wall above it. They were old, faded, but I could make out the faces. Lucas and me, standing side by side in the backyard. Our arms were around each other's shoulders, grinning like fools. But one of the faces was scratched out. Not just scratched, obliterated, as if someone had taken a razor to the paper. I reached up to touch it, and that's when I heard it. A low, guttural hiss. It came from the wardrobe. My heart raced. I froze, my breath shallow. The hiss came again, louder this time. I edged closer to the wardrobe, my phone's flashlight trembling in my hand. I pulled open the door, and a cat tumbled out, its fur matted and gray. It was Mr. Whiskers, our old family cat. But Mr. Whiskers had died years ago. The cat looked up at me with milky eyes, its mouth open in a snarl. It wasn't the same animal I remembered. This thing was wrong. It let out another hiss, baring its teeth, and then darted out of the room, disappearing into the shadows. I didn't wait to see where it went. I slammed the wardrobe door shut and backed away, my heart pounding in my ears. The room felt colder now, the air sharper. I could see my breath as I turned to leave. But before I reached the door, I heard something else. A whisper. It was soft, barely audible, but it sent a wave of dread through me. Get out while you still can. I spun around, but there was no one there. The whisper seemed to come from all around me, echoing off the wall. My skin crawled. I didn't wait to hear it again. I stepped out of the room, slammed the door shut, and leaned against it to catch my breath. The hallway was quiet. Too quiet. I could feel the weight of the house pressing down on me like it was trying to crush me. I knew I had to tell someone, but who? My mother? She would just deny it, pretend Lucas never existed. My friends? They would think I was losing my mind. And maybe I was. Maybe the stress of everything was getting to me. Maybe I was hallucinating. But then, as I stood there, I heard something else. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps coming from the room I had just left. They were slow, like someone was trying not to be heard. My blood ran cold. I pushed myself off the wall and ran. I didn't stop until I was back in my own bedroom, the door locked and barricaded. I sat on the floor, my back against the bed, and tried to calm down. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just been warned. Whatever was coming, it was closer now, and I wasn't ready. The scratching started again that night. Louder this time. It didn't stop. The attic was always a place of secrets. As a child, I rarely ventured up there, dared to climb the creaky ladder that seemed to groan under every step. But today, something drew me to maybe the same unseen force that had been tugging at the edges of my sanity. The air up there was thick and stale, like breathing through a damp cloth. Dust motes floated lazily in the faint sunlight that filtered through the grimy windows, casting long, skeletal shadows across the floor. I pushed aside old trunks, their lids hanging open like gaping mouths, revealing yellowed clothes and forgotten memories. There was something else up here, something I hadn't noticed before. A long rectangular object wrapped in a tattered cloth. My heart quickened as I pulled it out from under a pile of boxes. The fabric fell away, revealing a sword. It was old, the blade rusted and stained with something dark. I didn't need to touch it to know what it was. The whispers started again, soft, almost inaudible, but growing louder with each passing second. "You chose this," the voice repeated, echoing in my head. I spun around, but there was no one there. The attic was empty, the only sound the creaking of the old house and my own ragged breathing. I tightened my grip on the sword, the metal cold against my palms. It felt heavier than it looked, as if it carried the weight of years, centuries, of history. I didn't know why I had to find this, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was connected to Lucas, to the video, to everything that had been happening. The whispers stopped as abruptly as they had started. The silence was worse. It felt oppressive, like a physical force pressing down on me. I swallowed hard and turned to leave, but my feet felt rooted to the spot. Something was watching me. I could feel its eyes on me, boring into my skin. I forced myself to move, the sword clutched tightly in my hands. As I descended the ladder, the wooden rungs creaking beneath me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being herded towards some unseen destiny. The house seemed to hum with an ominous energy, like the quiet before a storm. I made my way to the bathroom, the sword still in hand. The mirror was fogged over from a recent shower, but as I set the sword down on the counter, I wiped a clean spot with my hand. My reflection stared back at me, pale and drawn. But then, something shifted. My reflection's mouth curved into a wide, exaggerated grin, a grin I wasn't making. My heart raced as I stepped back, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The grin grew wider, my reflection's eyes glinting with a malevolence that didn't belong to me. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking. The reflection didn't answer, but the grin grew even wider, stretching unnaturally across my face. I raised my hand and so did my reflection, but then it gave a thumbs up. My stomach twisted into a knot as I slammed my fist against the mirror. It shattered with a loud crack, shards of glass scattering across the countertop. I stumbled backward, tripping over the sword and nearly falling. I couldn't stay in the house. I needed to get out, to clear my head, to make sense of what was happening. But as I reached for the doorknob, I heard it, the scratching. It was louder now, more insistent, as if whatever was on the other side of the door was growing impatient. I froze. My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking the spell. It was a text from an unknown number. "You can't run from this. You chose this." My hands trembled as I typed out a response. "Who is this?" There was no reply. Instead, the scratching stopped. The sudden silence was more terrifying than the noise had ever been. I waited, holding my breath, but nothing happened. Slowly, I turned the doorknob and stepped out into the hallway. The house was quiet now, the tension almost palpable. I walked to my room, the sword still clutched in my hand. I set it down on my desk, trying to convince myself that it was just an old relic, that it didn't mean anything. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I had to keep it close, that it was the only thing standing between me and whatever was coming for me. I sat down on the edge of my bed, my mind racing. The whispers started again, soft at first, then louder, more urgent. "You chose this. You chose this. You chose this." I clamped my hands over my ears, but I could still hear the words echoing in my mind like a mantra. And then, just as suddenly as they had started, the whispers stopped. I sat there, my heart pounding, my palms slick with sweat. The silence was oppressive, heavy, like a physical weight pressing down on me. I didn't know what was happening to me, or what I was supposed to do, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't ignore this anymore. I had to face whatever was coming for me. But as I stood up, my eyes fell on the sword. It gleamed in the dim light, the stains on the blade seeming to shift, to pulse, like something alive. I knew then that I wasn't just fighting for my life. I was fighting for my soul. And I wasn't sure if I was going to win. The knocking started at midnight. At first it was a low thud, like someone tapping on the walls. I buried my head under the pillow, thinking it was just the house settling. But the rhythmic thud grew louder, more insistent. My heart raced as I tossed the pillow aside and sat up. The room was dim, lit only by the faint glow of my phone on the nightstand. I threw off the covers and stepped onto the cold floor. The knocking had stopped. The silence was heavier than the noise, pressing against my eardrums. I swallowed hard and moved toward the bedroom door. My hand hovered over the doorknob, hesitating. The knocking started again. This time, it was a frantic pounding, like fists against the walls. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice shaking. No one answered. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. The air was thick with an eerie stillness. The knocking seemed to come from all directions, echoing through the empty rooms. My bare feet chilled against the hardwood floor as I moved toward the stairs. When I reached the kitchen, I saw it. Dirt under my fingernails. Dark, crumbly soil. I stared at my hands, confusion and fear twisting my gut. When had I gotten dirty? I hadn't been outside in days. I turned on the faucet and scrubbed my hands, but the dirt clung stubbornly. My reflection in the window showed a pale, drawn face. My eyes looked sunken, my skin clammy. I didn't recognize myself. The knocking stopped. Again. I froze. The silence was suffocating. And then I heard my name, Eleanor. It was a whisper, soft and low, but it sent chills down my spine. I spun around, but I was alone in the kitchen. Eleanor, the voice repeated, louder this time. It didn't sound human. It echoed, like it was coming from somewhere far away, yet right beside me. I stumbled backward, hitting the counter. A sharp pain shot through my hip as I fell to the floor. The voice laughed, low, gravelly, unnatural. My breath came in short gasps as I scrambled to my feet and ran back upstairs. I slammed the bedroom door shut and locked it. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone. No missed calls, no messages. Just the time, 3:14 a.m. I sat on the edge of the bed, my heart pounding. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the house made me jump. Shadows on the wall seemed to move, twisting into shapes that watched me. When the first light of dawn seeped through the blinds, I finally fell into a restless sleep. It wasn't until morning that I realized my mother was gone. Her bed was untouched. Her purse was still on the kitchen counter, but her phone was missing. I checked every room, calling her name. The silence was deafening. I found her phone in the basement. At first, I thought it was just a faint glow in the dark. I stepped down the creaky stairs, my heart in my throat. The phone lay on the floor, the screen lit up. It was playing the video. I froze. Lucas's face filled the screen, clear now, no longer grainy or distorted. He looked just as he had when we were kids. His messy brown hair, his wide smile, his bright blue eyes. But there was something different about him. Something wrong. He was looking directly at the camera, directly at me. And then he mouthed a single word, Eleanor. I dropped the phone. It shattered on the concrete floor. The screen went black, but Lucas's face stayed in my mind. I turned and ran, my feet pounding the stairs. I didn't stop until I was back in my bedroom, slamming the door shut behind me. I leaned against the door, my chest heaving. My hands were shaking, and the dirt under my nails seemed to itch. The scratching at the door started again. This time, it wasn't just scratching. It was a low, guttural growl. I pressed my back against the door, my heart racing. Whatever was on the other side, it wasn't human. And then I heard my mother's voice. Eleanor, she said softly, let me in. I froze. Her voice sounded wrong. It was flat, hollow, like it was coming from somewhere else. Mom? I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The growling stopped. The scratching stopped. There was a long silence. And then she said, I am cold, Eleanor. Let me in. I didn't move. My legs felt like lead. The doorknob rattled. It turned slowly, creaking with each twist. Eleanor, she whispered again, open the door. Tears welled in my eyes. I wanted to believe it was her. I wanted to believe she was safe. But the voice didn't sound like my mother. It sounded like something else. The doorknob stopped moving. And then the knocking started again. This time, it wasn't just fists. It was something heavier. Something desperate. I screamed. When the knocking finally stopped, I collapsed to the floor, my body trembling. The room was silent now, but I knew I wasn't alone. I could feel it, watching me, waiting. And then the text came. It was from an unknown number. I am home. The sender's name flashed on the screen as Lucas. The phone rang shrill in the dead of night, cutting through the heavy silence like a knife. I groaned, rolling over to check the screen. It was Maddie, my childhood friend, her name flashing with an urgency that made my heart skip a beat. I hesitated, the clock on my nightstand reading 2:47 a.m. Who calls at this hour? I answered, my voice laced with sleep. "Maddie, what's wrong?" Her voice trembled, barely above a whisper. "Alex, oh God, you have to listen. I had the weirdest dream. About us. About the game." "The game?" My stomach twisted at the word. Our gladiator game with wooden swords and imaginations running wild. But the mention of it now sent a chill down my spine. I sat up, the room dimly lit by the moon seeping through the blinds. "What about it?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "We didn't play alone," she blurted, her breath quick. "There was a third kid. I don't know why I forgot him, but I remember now. His name was Jake." The name meant nothing, yet it sparked something deep in my mind, a shadow of recognition I couldn't grasp. "Maddie, I don't remember Jake," I lied, my voice steady despite the goosebumps rising on my arms. "Exactly," she exclaimed, her panic growing. "No one does. It's like he never existed. But I remember him, Alex. I remember playing with him and Lucas." Her name hung heavy in the air. Lucas. Missing for 13 years. Before I could respond, a text buzzed in my hand. Unknown number. One message. "Come outside. Let's play." My heart pounded, each beat a drum in my ears. The room felt colder, the air thick with an unseen presence. "Maddie, I have to go," I said, already swinging my legs over the bed. "Alex, don't go. It's not safe," she pleaded, but I hung up, my mind racing. The text was simple, but it pulled at me, an unseen force urging me outside. The house creaked as I stood, the floorboards groaning under my feet. I approached the door hesitantly, the handle cold in my hand. Outside, the night was still, the trees casting long, ominous shadows. The backyard was a sea of darkness, punctuated only by the faint light of my phone. "Lucas?" I called, my voice trembling. The storm from earlier had passed, leaving behind an eerie calm. But then I saw him, standing by the old oak where we used to play. He turned, his face pale, almost ghostly. His eyes, dark and hollow, met mine. He smiled, wide and unsettling, and lifted his hand. "A thumbs up!" The gesture twisted my gut, a grim reminder of the curse. "Come on, Alex," he said, his voice low, not like the brother I remembered. "Let's play." From the shadows, others emerged, their figures indistinct but undeniable. My breath caught, fear gripping me like a vice. "Lucas, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He stepped closer, the others moving with him, their forms shifting, never quite clear. "It's time to finish the game," he said, his smile widening. I took a step back, my mind racing. This wasn't my brother. Not anymore. The phone in my hand buzzed again, the screen flashing with the same message. "Come outside. Let's play." I looked up, and the figures had moved closer, their shadows engulfing Lucas. "Game over," Lucas whispered, his voice fading into the darkness. The screen went black, and I was alone in the night, the weight of the curse pressing down on me. The game was far from over. The night air was heavy, like a thick, damp blanket that clung to my skin as I stepped out into the backyard. The moon was hidden behind a veil of clouds, and the only light came from the faint glow of the porch lamp. The world was eerily silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. But the silence wasn't comforting. It was oppressive, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I didn't want to be there. Every part of me screamed to turn around, to run back inside and lock the door. But I couldn't. My legs felt heavy, as though rooted to the spot. Something was pulling me forward, a force I couldn't explain or resist. And then I saw him. Lucas. He stood just beyond the edge of the porch, in the shadows where the light couldn't reach. He looked the same, exactly as I remembered him. His messy brown hair, his crooked grin, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. But there was something wrong, something that made my blood run cold. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his smile was too wide, stretching across his face in a way that didn't seem human. His eyes were dark, too dark, like two black holes sucking in all the light around him. And yet, despite all of that, he looked like Lucas, my brother, my best friend. "Hey," he said, his voice low and rough, like gravel scraping against concrete. It sent a shiver down my spine. "It's been a while." I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. My heart was pounding in my chest, so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. I could taste fear, sharp and metallic, on the back of my tongue. Behind him in the trees, I could see movement. Shadows shifting, twisting, like living darkness. More of them. I didn't know how many, but I could sense their presence. A cold, oppressive weight that pressed down on me. "Who are they?" I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. Lucas tilted his head, his grin widening even more. "Friends," he said simply, as though that explained everything. "Old friends." I took a step back, my mind racing. This wasn't right. Lucas was dead. He had been gone for 13 years. But here he was, standing in my backyard, smiling at me like nothing was wrong. And then I remembered. The video. The thumbs up. The legend. A thumbs up meant death. And I had given a thumbs up. "I didn't mean to," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't know what it meant." Lucas chuckled, a low, ominous sound. "You should have paid attention," he said. "You should have remembered." He raised his hand and my breath caught. His thumb was down, pressed into his palm. And then, slowly, he turned it up. A thumbs up. I froze. My heart stopped. The world around me seemed to stop moving, as though time itself had paused. I could feel my blood rushing through my veins, pounding in my ears. I could taste fear, sharp and bitter, filling my mouth. And then everything went black. When I came to, I was lying on the ground, my head throbbing. The world around me was quiet, the only sound the distant howl of a dog. I sat up, my hands shaking as I looked around. The backyard was empty. Lucas was gone. The shadows were gone. It was just me, alone in the dark. But I knew it wasn't over. I could feel it in my bones, a cold, creeping dread that seeped into every part of me. Lucas was coming back, and next time I wouldn't be so lucky. I stumbled to my feet, my legs trembling beneath me. I needed to find answers. I needed to know what was happening and how to stop it. But as I turned to go back inside, I saw something that made my blood run cold. On the porch, in front of the door, was a small, rusty sword. It was old, the blade stained with something dark. It looked like blood. And next to it was a note, written in a child's handwriting, I remember now. The scratching at my door started again, louder this time, more insistent. I knew what it was. I knew who it was. And I knew that this time I wouldn't be able to ignore it. I picked up the sword, the metal cold and heavy in my hand. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I had to face it. I had to face whatever was coming for me. And as I stepped inside, the scratching stopped. The house was quiet, the only sound my own ragged breathing. I closed the door behind me, my hand trembling as I locked it. But I knew it wouldn't keep them out. Nothing would. The knocking started again, this time louder, more insistent. I could feel it in my bones, a rhythmic pounding that seemed to match the beat of my heart. I knew what was coming. I knew what I had to do. I took a deep breath, the sword clutched tightly in my hand. I couldn't run. I couldn't hide. I had to face this. And as I opened the door, I saw him again. Lucas, standing on the porch, his eyes black as coal, his smile stretching across his face like a grotesque parody of the brother I once knew. Behind him, the shadows moved, twisting and writhing like living darkness. More of them. I didn't know how many, but I could feel their presence, a cold, oppressive weight that pressed down on me. "You chose this," Lucas said, his voice low and rough. "You chose me." I raised the sword, the blade glinting in the faint light. I didn't know if it would help, but it was all I had. And then Lucas raised his hand. A thumbs up. The screen cuts black. The cold night air bit into my skin as I stood in the backyard, the same spot where Lucas and I had played as children. But now the atmosphere was heavy with an eerie silence, broken only by the distant hooting of an owl. The moon hung low, casting long, ominous shadows across the lawn. Lucas stood before me, his smile too wide, his eyes too dark, like voids sucking in the light around us. Behind him, shadowy figures shifted in the trees, their presence more felt than seen. My heart raced as I tried to process the surreal scene before me. And then it hit me, a flood of memories I had never known I had. There wasn't just Lucas and me in those games. There was a third child, a boy with messy brown hair and a mischievous grin. We had called him Max, our inseparable friend. But where was he now? Why had I forgotten him until this moment? The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. The game was real. The choice was real. And Max had been the first to be chosen, his fate sealed with a thumbs up, his existence erased from our lives and memories. The curse of the Last Judgment had taken him, leaving only fragments of his presence in faded photographs and whispers in the wind. My mind reeled as I questioned my sanity. Could this all be a product of a stressed imagination, a symptom of schizophrenia? But the cold presence before me was all too real. "Lucas," I whispered, my voice trembling. "What happened to Max?" Lucas's smile twitched, his eyes glinting with something otherworldly. "Max was chosen first," he replied, his voice low and monotone. "He gave a thumbs up, and now it's your turn." As he spoke, the shadowy figures moved closer, their forms becoming more defined. They were children, their faces distorted, eyes hollow. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath as I exhaled. A dog barked in the distance, but the sound was muffled, as if coming from another world. Suddenly, my mother appeared beside Lucas, her presence unexpected. Her eyes were vacant, her skin pale, and her voice barely above a whisper. "I tried to protect you," she murmured, her words laced with guilt and fear, "but I couldn't erase the truth." The truth hit me like a wave. She had known about Max, about the curse, and had tried to shield me from it. But the past couldn't stay buried, and now it was catching up with us. As the figures closed in, their whispers grew louder, a chilling chorus of thumbs up, thumbs up. I felt a hand on my shoulder, cold and clammy. I turned to see Max standing there, his eyes filled with a deep sadness and a hint of vengeance. "You forgot me," he whispered, his voice breaking. But I remember. The world seemed to narrow to this moment, the choice before me. The game was real, and now it was my turn. With a deep breath, I raised my hand, my thumb hesitating. The weight of the curse pressed down on me, the shadows urging me to decide. And then, with a clarity I didn't know I possessed, I gave a thumbs down. The world around me exploded in a cacophony of sounds, shouts, wails, the rustling of leaves as the figures recoiled. The curse was broken. The game ended. As the shadows retreated, Lucas and Max faded away, their forms dissolving into the night. The backyard fell silent once more, the moonlight breaking through the clouds. I stood there, alone, the weight of the past lifting with each breath. The screen of my phone, still clutched in my hand, flickered back to life. The video played once more, but this time it showed us as we truly were. 3 children, laughing, playing, our innocence untainted. The shadow behind me was gone, replaced by a bright light symbolizing the closure I had found. As the video ended, the scratching at my door ceased, the knocking in the walls silenced. The house felt still, the curse lifted. I walked back inside, the warmth of home enveloping me, and shut the door on the past, ready to face the future with clarity.
The lost scene. The air was thick with dust as I crawled through my grandmother's attic. It had been 2 weeks since she passed away, and my family was sorting through her belongings. I had always loved her old quirky stuff, but nothing could have prepared me for what I found that day. Tucked between stacks of yellowed newspapers and forgotten trinkets was a VHS tape. The label read The Wizard of Oz, but something about it felt wrong. The artwork was off. Dorothy's face was too pale, her eyes too dark, almost hollow. The back of the case had a single phrase scrawled in red marker. "Watch closely. It watches back." I laughed it off as some weird bootleg copy. Maybe it was a collector's edition or a prank. I took it home, curious to see what it was like. That night, I popped the tape into my old VHS player, grabbed a blanket, and settled in. The opening credits rolled normal. The familiar MGM lion, the nostalgic music, the black and white Kansas fields. Dorothy, Toto, the tornado. All of it felt like the movie I grew up with. But when Dorothy landed in Oz, something fell off. The colors seemed brighter, almost too vibrant. The trees seemed taller, the flowers more grotesque. And then she said it. Instead of the iconic line, "Toto, I've got a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore," she said something else. Something that made my blood run cold. "Toto, we were never in Kansas." I must have misheard. I told myself it was just a different version, a misremembered line. But then the Tin Man appeared, and I saw it, the thing on his forehead. A dark mark like a third eye, staring straight into the camera. My stomach dropped. I tried to hit pause, but the remote wouldn't work. The screen flickered, glitched, and suddenly, Dorothy turned toward the camera. She smiled, not at the scarecrow or the lion, at me. That was the moment I realized I had never seen this version before, and that something was watching me from inside the screen. Over the next few days, I tried to brush it off as paranoia. Maybe the tape was just messed up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in my head. When I rewatched my own copy of The Wizard of Oz, Tin Man's third eye was there. Or was it? No. Wait. My friends argued with me when I brought it up. Half of them swore they remembered the lion as Toto. We were never in Kansas, while the others were adamant it was always the original. Confusion turned into frustration. Did I have some kind of mental breakdown? But then the whispers started. At first, it was just a faint hum in the dead of night. I wrote it off as the house settled. But then I heard names. Dorothy, Toto, Kansas. The words were whispered so softly, they could have been coming from outside my window or inside my head. I started seeing things too. Movement out of the corner of my eye. Shadows that looked like the Tin Man's mask or the Scarecrow's ragged clothes. One night, I woke up to the sound of static. My TV was on, blaring white noise. And there she was. Dorothy, standing in an empty field, her hollow eyes staring straight into mine. She lifted her hand and waved. Slowly, deliberately, as if she knew I was there. I tried to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. The TV flickered, and she was gone. The VHS tape was back on my shelf. I had thrown it away days ago. I couldn't take it anymore. I searched online for answers, diving deep into obscure film history. That's when I found it, a conspiracy theory about a lost scene from The Wizard of Oz that was supposedly cut before release. People claim the cast had experienced strange occurrences during filming. Actors forgot their lines. Props went missing. One extra even came forward years later saying it was like something else was controlling them. And then there was the story of the vanished set worker, a young woman who disappeared during filming. No records of her existence remain. No name, no photographs, just rumors. I decided to visit the old film lot where The Wizard of Oz was made. Maybe I could find some answers. But when I got there, the security guard just shook his head. "There's no record of that stage ever existing," he said. "You're probably thinking of another studio." On my way home, I received a call from an unknown number. It was a film restoration expert. He had heard about the tape and wanted to analyze it. When I handed it over, he examined it carefully, muttering under his breath. A few days later, he called me back. His voice was trembling. "There's a hidden frame," he said. "It's inserted where it shouldn't be. It's a black and white image of a girl, but it's not Judy Garland. She's older, emaciated, and terrified. And there's a message scrawled at the bottom. Help me. I am still here." That night, the whispers grew louder. I woke up to the sound of my TV turning on by itself. The VHS was playing again. This time, it wasn't Dorothy. It was the Tin Man. He was standing alone in the dark, his metal mask glinting under a faint spotlight. Slowly, the mask began to bend, shifting like liquid. Underneath was a rotting human face, stitched together with wire. I tried to scream, but my voice was gone. The screen flickered black. When it came back on, Dorothy stood at the crossroads, her hollow eyes staring directly into mine. "You should have never watched," she said. Her voice was low, distorted, and it sent chills down my spine. The TV screen flickered one last time and turned black. The last thing I heard was the sound of footsteps behind me. I never found out what happened to that tape. I don't know if it's still out there waiting for someone else to watch. But I do know this: some things are better left forgotten. And if you ever come across a VHS tape with a hollow-eyed Dorothy on the cover, don't play it. Trust me, it watches back. The tape in the attic. The creak of the old wooden stairs echoed through the empty house like a mournful sigh. I stepped carefully, my sneakers scuffling against the dusty steps. The air in the attic was thick with the scent of decay and forgotten memories. Sunlight filtered through the grimy window, casting long shadows that stretched like skeletal fingers across the floor. I had always loved coming to Grandma's house, but now, with her gone, the place felt hollow, like a shell of what it once was. I wasn't sure why I'd decided to explore the attic. Maybe it was the guilt of not visiting enough while she was alive. Or maybe it was the need to feel close to her one last time. Whatever the reason, I found myself standing in the middle of the dusty, cobweb-ridden space, surrounded by old trunks, broken furniture, and boxes stacked haphazardly. A faint hum of flies buzzed around a forgotten corner, and I shooed them away, my heart heavy. My fingers trailed over the edge of an old trunk, the wood smooth and cool under my touch. It wasn't locked, so I lifted the lid, revealing a treasure trove of yellowed lace, old photographs, and a few pieces of jewelry that sparkled faintly in the dim light. I pulled out a photograph, the edges curled and faded. It was Grandma and Grandpa, standing in front of this very house, their faces young and full of life. I smiled, but the smile faltered when I noticed something strange behind them. An old television set sitting on a rickety stand, its screen cracked and opaque. I didn't remember that TV being here before. I set the photograph aside and reached deeper into the trunk, my fingers brushing against something smooth and rectangular. I pulled it out, and my breath caught. It was a VHS tape by O.I. The cover was faded, but the title was unmistakable, The Wizard of Oz. But something about it felt Wrong. There was no studio logo, no ratings box, just a black and white picture of Dorothy standing in a field, her eyes too dark, too hollow. The image seemed to stare at me, unblinking, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. I turned the tape over. On the back, written in red marker, was a single phrase, "Watch closely. It watches back." My heart skipped a beat. I didn't recognize the handwriting, and I was sure Grandma wouldn't have written something so eerie. I glanced around the attic, as if expecting someone to be standing there watching me. But I was alone. I shrugged it off, telling myself it was just some weird bootleg copy. Maybe Grandma had picked it up at a garage sale or something. I set the tape aside and continued digging through the trunk, finding an old blanket that still smelled faintly of her perfume. I hugged it to my chest, the familiar scent bringing a wave of nostalgia. But as I turned to leave, my eyes landed on the VHS tape again. Something about it drew me in, like a magnet. Curiosity killed the cat, I muttered to myself. But I couldn't help it. I picked up the tape and examined it more closely. The cover was worn, the edges frayed, and the title was peeling off. I wondered how old it was. VHS tapes were ancient now, relics of a time before streaming and digital everything. I hadn't even owned a VCR in years. But something about this tape felt important, like it was waiting for me to find it. I decided then and there that I had to watch it. I had to know why it was hidden away in Grandma's attic, and why it felt so different from the Wizard of Oz I knew and loved. I tucked the tape into my bag and headed downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. The house felt quieter now, the air heavier, as if it disturbed something that was meant to stay hidden. When I got home, I rummaged through my old boxes, searching for my childhood VCR. It wasn't easy to find, but eventually, I unearthed it from the back of my closet, covered in dust and cobwebs. I plugged it into my TV, the outdated connectors clicking into place with a satisfying thunk. I slid the tape into the VCR, the mechanism whirring to life as the screen flickered and went black. For a moment, I thought the tape was broken. Then suddenly, the opening credits rolled. The music was familiar, the bright colors of Oz bursting onto the screen. But something about it felt off. The quality was grainy, the sound slightly distorted, like it was playing on a radio with bad reception. I leaned back on the couch, pulling a blanket over my shoulders, and told myself I was being paranoid. It was just an old tape, nothing to worry about. And then, Dorothy appeared on screen, standing in her Kansas farmhouse, Toto by her side. The tornado swept in, the house lifted into the air, and I felt a familiar sense of wonder. But when Dorothy landed in Oz, something was wrong. The vibrant colors seemed duller, the music discordant. And then, Dorothy turned to Toto, her lips moving. "Toto, we were never in Kansas," she said. My stomach dropped. I sat up straight, my heart racing. What? That wasn't the line. It was supposed to be, "Toto, I've got a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore." I must have misheard it. But when I rewound the tape and played it again, the words were the same. "Toto, we were never in Kansas." A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. My mind raced. Who would edit a classic like this? And why? I tried to tell myself it was just some weird fan edit, but deep down I knew it was more than that. The tape felt alive, like it was watching me. I glanced around my darkening room, the shadows cast by the flickering TV screen twisting into strange shapes on the walls. I wasn't alone. I could feel it. Something was watching me. Something that didn't want me to see this. But I couldn't look away. The screen had me in its grip, refusing to let go. And then, the Tin Man appeared. His face was the same as I remembered, but there was something on his forehead. A dark mark. A third eye. It stared at me, unblinking, and I felt a scream rise in my throat. I grabbed the remote, my fingers trembling as I pressed the pause button. Nothing happened. The screen flickered, the image distorting like water on a hot day. And then Dorothy turned toward the camera. She didn't look at the scarecrow or the lion. She looked at me, and she smiled. Not the sweet, innocent smile of the Dorothy I knew. This was something else. Something wrong. Her lips stretched too wide, her eyes glinting with something cold and calculating. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. The room around me seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as the screen filled my vision. I was trapped, unable to move, unable to look away. And then, everything went black. The TV screen flickered once, twice, and then went dark. The room fell silent, the only sound the heavy pounding of my heart. I sat there for what felt like hours, my hands shaking, my mind racing. What had I just seen? And why did I feel like I'd made a terrible mistake? Finally, I found the courage to stand up and turn off the TV. The room felt colder now, the shadows deeper, darker. I told myself it was just my imagination, that the tape was some twisted prank. But deep down I knew better. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. And then I heard it. A faint whisper, soft but unmistakable. Watch closely, it watches back. The line that never existed. The air in my grandmother's attic was thick with dust and the faint scent of old paper. The wooden beams creaked under my feet as I shuffled through the scattered boxes, my fingers brushing against yellowed letters and forgotten trinkets. I hadn't set foot in this house since her funeral a month ago, but something about the silence felt heavy, like it was waiting for me to disturb it. That's when I saw it, buried under a stack of faded photographs and a crocheted blanket. A VHS tape. The label was simple, just a black and white image of Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz. But there was something off about her face. Her eyes were darker than I remembered, almost hollow, as if someone had painted over them with a deeper shade of black. The back of the case had no description, just a single phrase scrawled in red marker. Watch closely. It watches back. I snorted. My grandmother had always been a fan of weird, obscure movies. This must have been some bootleg copy or a collector's edition she'd picked up at a flea market. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I tucked the tape into my bag, deciding to take it home and give it a watch. That night, I sat in my dimly lit living room, the VHS player humming to life. The TV flickered, spitting out static before the familiar opening credits rolled. I leaned back, expectant. This was The Wizard of Oz. I'd seen it a dozen times as a kid. Judy Garland's voice echoed through the speakers, and I hummed along, half out of nostalgia, half out of boredom. The tornado scene came and went, the screen flashing with the familiar Technicolor shift as Dorothy landed in Oz. But as the camera panned across the Technicolor landscape, something felt off. The color seemed too vivid, the music a little too sharp. And then Dorothy turned to Toto, her lips moving. "Toto," she said, "we were never in Kansas." My stomach dropped. I leaned forward, my breath catching in my throat. That wasn't the line. It was supposed to be, "Toto, I've got a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore." This was different. It wasn't just a slight variation. This was a complete rewrite. And the way Dorothy delivered it, her tone was flat, almost robotic, like she was reciting lines from a script she didn't understand. I told myself it was a mishearing, a trick of the audio. But then the camera shifted, focusing on the Tin Man. I froze. There, on his forehead, was a mark I had never seen before. It looked like a third eye, small and dark, as if it had been painted on with ink. My heart quickened as the Tin Man approached Dorothy, his voice echoing oddly through the speakers. "This is the place," he said, his tone low and monotone. "Where the road splits." The room seemed to grow colder. I could feel a pressure in the air, like a weight pressing against my chest. It wasn't just the movie. Something else was in the room with me. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing there. But I was alone. The TV screen flickered, the image glitching like an old computer screen. Dorothy turned toward the camera, her eyes locking onto mine. My breath hitched. She wasn't looking at the scarecrow or the lion. She was looking at me. And then she smiled. It wasn't a warm, cheerful smile. It was too wide, too forced, stretching across her face like a crack in porcelain. The screen blinked again, and suddenly the yellow brick road was gone. The background was black, pitch black, except for Dorothy standing in the center of the screen like a specter. "Do you remember?" she said, her voice low and distorted, like it was being played through a broken speaker. "Do you remember where you came from?" My hands were trembling as I reached for the remote. The buttons wouldn't respond. The screen flickered again, and for a split second I saw something else. Something that wasn't part of the movie. A shadowy figure standing just behind Dorothy, its face obscured by the darkness. Then the image snapped back, and Dorothy was walking down the road again, humming a tune that sounded nothing like "We're Off to See the Wizard." I yanked the plug out of the wall, the screen going black with a faint pop. My heart was racing, my palms slick with sweat. What the hell had I just watched? I told myself it was some kind of prank, a twisted edit someone had done for fun. But the feeling in the room didn't go away. It felt like I was being watched, even now with the TV off. And then I heard it, a faint, low whisper, like someone was standing right behind me. "You should have listened." I spun around, but there was no one there. The whisper seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. My skin crawled as I grabbed the tape and shoved it back into its case. Whatever this was, I didn't want to see any more of it. But as I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of myself in the TV screen. My reflection. It was distorted, the glass warping my face into something unfamiliar. And then, just for a second, my reflection's mouth opened, wider than it should have been able to, wider than any human mouth. I didn't wait to see if it would do anything else. I stumbled out of the room, slamming the door shut behind me. Whatever was on that tape, it wasn't just a movie, and I was starting to think that my grandmother might not have been the one who bought it. The smiling Dorothy. The tape was hissed with static, the screen flickering like a dying light bulb. At first I thought it was just the old VHS player acting up, but then Dorothy stepped into frame, her posture strange, her movements stiff. She wasn't walking toward the yellow brick road or greeting the scarecrow. Instead, she stood still, her gaze fixed on something I couldn't see. And then it hit me. She was looking directly at me. My breath caught in my throat. That wasn't right. Dorothy wasn't supposed to acknowledge the camera. She was a character in a movie, a story meant to entertain, not interact. I leaned forward, my heart pounding as her eyes seemed to lock onto mine. They were different now, darker, almost black, like voids sucking in the light around her. "Toto," she said, her voice low and unnatural. "We were never in Kansas." The words sent a chill down my spine. I must have misheard it before, I told myself. It had to be a trick of the audio, the poor quality of the tape. But deep down I knew what I'd heard, and it wasn't the line I remembered. I reached for the remote to pause the tape, but when I pressed the buttons, nothing happened. The screen continued to flicker, and Dorothy's smile grew wider. It wasn't her iconic, cheerful smile. This was different, too wide, too human. Her lips stretched across her face, revealing too many teeth, and for a moment I could swear her eyes glowed faintly, like embers in the dark. "Dorothy, what the—" I muttered, my voice trembling. The room around me felt heavier, the air thick and heavy, as if something invisible was pressing against my chest. I tried to stand to turn off the TV, but my legs wouldn't move. My fingers dug into the couch cushions, my knuckles white. The screen flickered again, and the yellow brick road behind Dorothy vanished, leaving only a dull gray void. She took a step closer to the camera, her movements jerky, unnatural. Her smile never wavered, but her eyes, those hollow, black eyes, seemed to bore into my soul. I could feel her gaze like a cold weight, pressing down on me. "Who are you?" I whispered, not meaning to speak aloud. As if in response, the TV screen crackled with static, the sound like nails on a chalkboard. The room seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as Dorothy's face filled the screen. Her breath fogged the camera lens, and I could see the faintest reflection of my own face staring back at me, distorted and pale. Suddenly the screen went black, and the tape ejected with a loud clunk. I jumped, my heart racing, as the TV fell silent. The room felt still, the oppressive weight lifting as quickly as it had come. For a moment I sat there, my chest heaving, wondering if it had all been some twisted hallucination. But then, I heard my grandmother's voice. "Clara?" she said, her tone soft, concerned. I spun around, but the room was empty. The attic was dim, the only light coming from the small, grimy window high above. My grandmother had passed away a month ago, but for a second, I could have sworn she was standing behind me. "Grandma," I whispered, my voice shaking. The air seemed to vibrate with an unspoken answer, but there was nothing. Silence. I turned back to the TV, the VHS tape lying on the floor. The cover was face up, Dorothy's hollow eyes staring at me. I grabbed the tape and shoved it back into the case, my hands trembling. I didn't want to watch anymore. I didn't want to know what other secrets this twisted version of the Wizard of Oz held. But as I stood to leave, I noticed something I hadn't before. The back of the VHS case had writing scrawled in red marker. "Watch closely, it watches back." A shiver ran down my spine. Who would write something like that? And why? I glanced around the attic, half expecting someone to be lurking in the shadows, but there was no one. Only dust motes floating in the faint light. I tightened my grip on the tape and hurried downstairs, the wooden steps creaking beneath my feet. I didn't stop until I was back in my room, the door locked behind me. I tossed the tape into my desk drawer, trying to ignore the nagging feeling that I'd just seen something I wasn't supposed to see. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dorothy's smile, her black eyes, and the empty void where the yellow brick road should have been. I kept telling myself it was just a bootleg tape, some sick prank someone had played on an old VHS. But the way she looked at me, it felt real. I threw off the covers and sat up, my heart still racing. Maybe I should show the tape to someone else, get a second opinion. But who would believe me? My best friend, Sarah, was the only person I could think of who might take me seriously. She had always been obsessed with conspiracy theories and urban legends. I picked up my phone and sent her a text. "Hey, you free tomorrow? I found something weird at my grandma's house. You need to see it." She responded almost immediately. "Weird? How weird?" "You'll see," I typed back, hesitating. "Just come over tomorrow." I set the phone down and leaned back against the headboard, staring at the dark ceiling. The house was quiet, the only sound the occasional creak of the old wooden floorboards. But then, faintly, I heard something else, a low, melodic hum. It sounded like "Over the Rainbow." My breath hitched. The music was soft, distant, but it was definitely there. I threw on a pair of sweatpants and a hoodie and crept downstairs to the living room. The TV was off, but the hum grew louder as I approached it. I pressed the power button, and the screen flickered to life. The VHS tape was playing again, the scene frozen on Dorothy's smiling face. I tried to turn it off, but the remote wouldn't work. The buttons didn't even light up. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead as Dorothy's eyes snapped toward the camera, her smile widening even further. And then, she waved. The footage no one remembers. The dim glow of the computer screen cast long shadows across the room as I typed furiously, my fingers flying over the keyboard. The line echoed in my mind. "Toto, we were never in Kansas." I had to find some mention of it, some confirmation that I wasn't losing my grip on reality. But as the search results loaded, a knot tightened in my stomach. Nothing. No mention of that line. No forum discussions, no obscure blogs. It was as if those words had never existed. I leaned back in my chair, the creak of the wood echoing through the silent house. My mind raced, thoughts tumbling over each other. Maybe it was a mishearing, a trick of the audio, but deep down I knew what I heard. A shiver ran down my spine as I clicked on a link titled "The Dark Side of Oz: Unseen Scenes and Unsettling Tales." The forum was old, the design outdated, but the posts were numerous. Scrolling through, I found a thread about a lost scene cut from the film. Users spoke of a version where Dorothy's line was different, where the Tin Man bore a mark, but no one had seen it, only heard rumors. One post caught my eye. My grandfather was an extra. He never spoke of it, but in his notes, he wrote of strange occurrences, actors forgetting lines, crew members acting oddly. He believed something was controlling them. I felt a chill as I read. The words on the screen seemed to shift, as if someone was watching me. I looked up. The room empty, but the sensation lingered. My phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a text from my friend Emily. "Hey, you okay? You've been distant lately." I hesitated, unsure how to respond. How could I explain this? "I'm fine," I tagged finally. "Just stressed with some stuff." She replied with a concerned emoji, but I let it go. I couldn't burden her with this. The house creaked, the sound making me jump. I turned back to the computer, determined to find answers. Another link led me to an interview with an archivist who had worked on restoring classic films. "There were rumors," he said, "of a scene so unsettling it was destroyed. But I believe it's out there, hidden away." I decided to visit the local film archive, hoping to find some clue. The next day I stood in a musty room filled with old reels and dusty files. The archivist, an elderly man with kind eyes, listened as I recounted my experience. His expression turned serious, and he nodded slowly. "Yes, I've heard stories. There's a legend about a set worker who vanished during filming. No records of her exist, as if she never was." He pulled out an old journal, the pages yellowed. "Some say she's trapped in the film, her spirit caught in the footage." I felt a cold dread as he spoke, the air thickening around us. That night, I couldn't sleep. The TV flickered in the corner, casting eerie shadows. I heard whispers, soft and indistinct, but they sent a shiver down my spine. I told myself it was the wind, but the words seemed to come from all around me. "Help me, I am still here." I threw off the covers and approached the TV, my heart pounding. The screen was static, but as I watched it cleared, showing Dorothy standing alone in a desolate field. She turned to me, her smile wide and unsettling. "Toto, we were never in Kansas," she said, her voice distorted. I stumbled back, tripping over my chair. The TV went black, the room silent once more. I sat on the floor, my breath ragged, trying to make sense of it all. But as the night wore on, the line replayed in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The next morning, I received a text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have looked." My blood ran cold. I didn't know who it was, but the message was clear. I was in over my head, and whatever was on that tape was just the beginning. Changed memories. The next morning, I woke up with a strange, lingering unease. It wasn't just the vivid memory of Dorothy's unsettling smile or the Tin Man's third eye. It was something deeper. A feeling that something in my mind had shifted, like the ground beneath my feet had been pulled away. I tried to brush it off as mere paranoia, but as the day wore on, the feeling only grew stronger. I decided to do what any sane person would do. I sought out proof. I had my own copy of The Wizard of Oz on DVD, one I'd bought years ago. I found it in my movie collection, dusted it off, and popped it into the player. The familiar opening credits rolled, and I waited patiently for the scene where Dorothy lands in Oz. When it came, I leaned forward, my heart pounding in my chest, and there it was. The Tin Man's forehead. A dark, swirling mark that looked like a third eye stared back at me. It wasn't just on the VHS tape. It was here, on my DVD, on my copy of the movie. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I must have misremembered. No, I knew the Tin Man didn't have a third eye in the original. I'd seen the movie a dozen times as a kid, but here it was. It was as if I'd been lied to my whole life. That's when the real confusion hit. If the Tin Man's third eye was always there, why had I never noticed it before? Had I just forgotten? Or had it actually changed? The thought sent a shiver down my spine. I needed to talk to someone. Someone who would tell me I wasn't losing my mind. I texted my best friend, Sarah. We'd been friends since high school, and she was the kind of person who'd tell me straight up if I was overreacting. I asked her to come over, and she agreed, though she sounded curious about my urgency. When she arrived, I wasted no time. "Sarah, do you remember The Wizard of Oz?" I asked, holding up my DVD case. "Of course," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Who doesn't? Why are you acting so weird? What about the Tin Man? Does he have a third eye in the movie?" Sarah blinked. "A third eye? Like on his forehead?" "Yeah," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "A dark, swirling mark, like an extra eye staring right at you." She frowned, her expression softening. "No, I don't think so. The Tin Man's just the Tin Man. A hollow tin face. No extra eyes. Are you okay? You look really pale." I sighed, trying to calm myself. "Okay, so you don't remember it. But what about Dorothy's line after she lands in Oz? What does she say to Toto?" Sarah thought for a moment. "She says, 'Toto, I've got a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore. Definitely.' One of the most famous lines in movie history." "Yeah," I said, my stomach twisting into knots. "That's what I thought too. But on that old VHS tape I found, she says something different. She says, 'Toto, we were never in Kansas. And the Tin Man, he has this third eye, a dark, ugly mark right on his forehead.'" Sarah's expression changed from curiosity to concern. "Okay, first of all, where did you get this tape? And second, maybe you've been working too much. You're starting to freak me out." I shook my head. "I'm telling you, this tape is different. And now I'm seeing things in my own copy of the movie that I never noticed before. I'm not imagining this, Sarah. Something's off." She hesitated, then said, "Okay, let's check. If you're so sure, let's watch your DVD together." We sat down and I played the scene again. When the Tin Man appeared, Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What is that?" I pointed. "That's what I'm telling you. It's a third eye, and it wasn't there before, I swear." Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide. It's creepy, but now that I see it, it feels familiar. Like I've seen it before, but I haven't. Do you know what I mean?" I nodded, my mind racing. "Exactly. It's like I'm remembering two different versions of the same thing. One where the Tin Man has a third eye, and one where he doesn't. But which one is real?" Sarah bit her lip. "Maybe you're just stressed. Maybe you're overthinking it." But I knew what I saw. And now, Sarah was seeing it too. The Tin Man's third eye was undeniable. It was there, staring at us like an unblinking, soulless thing. That's when I decided to dig deeper. I grabbed my laptop and started searching online. The Wizard of Oz by Third Eye, Tin Man. I expected to find nothing, but what I found shocked me. There were forums, dozens of them. People talking about the same thing, a version of The Wizard of Oz where the Tin Man has a third eye and Dorothy says, "We were never in Kansas." Some claimed to have seen it in theaters when they were kids. Others said they'd found old VHS tapes with the strange edits. But when they tried to show them to others, the tapes were gone, or the scenes had changed back to the original. I scrolled through page after page, my heart pounding. People were calling it the Mandela effect, a collective false memory. But I had the tape. I had proof. Then I saw it, a post from someone who claimed to have worked in film restoration. They said that during the original filming of The Wizard of Oz, strange things happened. Actors would forget their lines. Some even claimed to have seen shadowy figures on set. One extra reportedly quit after seeing something that wasn't human in the reflection of the Tin Man's mask. I felt a chill run down my spine. "Sarah, look at this," I said, turning the laptop toward her. She read in silence, her face growing paler with each passing sentence. "Do you think it's true?" she asked finally. "Do you think the movie is haunted?" I didn't have an answer. By the time Sarah left that evening, the sun had set, casting long shadows across my living room. I tried to distract myself by watching TV, but every channel seemed to be playing old movies. And then, out of nowhere, The Wizard of Oz came on. I shut it off immediately, but the image lingered in my mind. Dorothy walking down the yellow brick road. The Tin Man with his hollow, staring third eye. And then, as I lay in bed, I heard it. A whisper. Faint but unmistakable. "Toto, we were never in Kansas." I bolted upright, my heart racing. The room was silent. But then, I heard it again. Louder this time. "Toto, we were never in Kansas." I threw off the covers and stumbled out of bed. My TV was on. I could see the light flickering from the living room. I hadn't turned it on. I was sure of it. I approached it cautiously, my bare feet creaking on the floor. The screen was paused on a scene from The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy was standing in the middle of a field, her eyes black as coal. The Tin Man stood behind her, his third eye glowing faintly. And then Dorothy turned. Not to the Tin Man, not to the Scarecrow or the Lion. She turned to me. She smiled. I screamed. The voices at night. The first time it happened, I thought it was just the house settling. Old houses creak and groan at night, right? But then I heard my name. Emily. Spoken softly, almost like a whisper in my ear. I jerked upright in bed, my heart pounding like a jackhammer. The clock on my nightstand glowed 2:17 a.m. The room was dark, except for the faint moonlight filtering through the curtains. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. No one answered. I told myself it was just my imagination, leftover paranoia from the strange VHS tape. But then I heard it again. Emily. This time, it wasn't just a whisper. It sounded melodic. Familiar, almost like a voice I should recognize. I fumbled for the lamp on my nightstand and flipped it on. The sudden light made me blink, but the room was empty. Just my bed, my desk, the bookshelf lined with old paperbacks. Nothing out of place. I lay back down, trying to convince myself it was just a dream. But as I drifted off to sleep, I heard it again. Emily. This time, it wasn't alone. Other voices joined in, a chorus of whispers that didn't make sense. Words jumbled together, but they all seemed to be saying one thing. "Watch me, watch me, watch me." I sat up again, this time throwing off the covers and getting out of bed. My legs felt shaky as I approached the TV. It was off, thank God. But then, without warning, it flickered to life. The screen filled with static, a hiss of white noise that made my teeth grind. I grabbed the remote and pressed the power button. Nothing happened. I pressed it again, harder. Still nothing. The static continued, louder now, until suddenly it stopped. The screen went black and then Dorothy was there. She wasn't in Oz. She wasn't on the yellow brick road or in the Emerald City. She was standing in a field, but it wasn't the colorful, vibrant one from the movie. It was gray, desolate, empty. She wore her blue and white gingham dress, but it was torn and dirty, the hem frayed. Her shoes were scuffed, her face smudged with dirt, and her eyes, those hollow, dark eyes, stared directly into the camera. "Hello, Emily," she said. Her voice wasn't the cheerful, innocent voice I remembered. It was low, almost a growl, and it sent a chill down my spine. I froze. My hands were shaking, the remote slipping from my fingers. Dorothy lifted her hand, her movements slow and stiff, and waved. It wasn't a friendly wave. It was a beckoning gesture, as if she wanted me to come closer. "Emily," she said again. "Come and see." The screen flickered, and for a moment I thought it would cut out. But instead the image changed. Dorothy was closer now, her face filling the screen. Her eyes seemed to bore into mine, and I could feel a strange, heavy pressure in the room, as if something was watching me from the other side of the TV. I turned and ran, slamming my bedroom door shut behind me. My heart was racing, my palms slick with sweat. I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath, but I could still hear the whispers. Emily, Emily, Emily. It didn't stop that night. Every time I tried to sleep, the TV would turn on by itself. The VHS tape, which I had thrown away after the first time, was back on my shelf. I found it sitting there the next morning, as if it had never been gone. I tried to ignore it, but the voices grew louder, more insistent. They started to sound like people I knew. My best friend Sarah, my cousin Matt, even my grandmother. They called my name, pleaded with me to watch. "You shouldn't have looked," my grandmother's voice said one night. "Now you can't look away." I started to doubt my own sanity. Was I hallucinating? Was this some kind of sleep paralysis? Or was it something worse, something like schizophrenia, where the line between reality and delusion blurred completely? I couldn't take it anymore. I packed the tape in a plastic bag and drove to the nearest dumpster, determined to get rid of it once and for all. But when I came home, it was sitting on my shelf again. This time it wasn't alone. Next to it was an old, worn-out copy of The Wizard of Oz, but it wasn't the version I owned. The cover was different. Dorothy's face was distorted, her eyes black as coal. The title was written in red letters, and beneath it, a single sentence was scrawled in the same crimson ink: "You shouldn't have looked." I screamed. Not a quiet, controlled scream, but a raw, guttural sound that tore through my chest. I threw the tape across the room, shattering it against the wall. But when I turned on the TV the next night, the VHS was playing. Dorothy was back, her hollow eyes staring at me, her voice calling my name. And this time, when the screen flickered, I saw something else. A shadowy figure standing just behind Dorothy, tall and imposing, its face hidden behind a mask that glinted like metal. The Tin Man. But his mask was different now. It wasn't smooth and polished. It was twisted, grotesque, with something bulging beneath the surface. He raised a hand, his gloved fingers trembling, and then, in a voice that was both familiar and yet completely alien, he spoke. "Emily," he said, "we've been waiting." The screen went black, and the TV turned off. I sat there, frozen, my body numb with fear. The voices in my head were silent now, replaced by an oppressive stillness. It didn't matter what I did, throwing the tape away, smashing the TV, locking myself in my room. The voices would come back. Dorothy would come back. And this time, she wouldn't be alone. The missing frame. The dim glow of the computer screen illuminated Mr. Thompson's face, his eyes wide with a mix of fascination and fear as he leaned back in his chair. The hum of the machinery in his workshop seemed to grow louder, as if it too were listening to our conversation. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "This frame, it wasn't here before. I've worked with a lot of old films, but this is something else." I nodded, my stomach twisting into knots. "What do you think it means? Who is that girl?" Before he could answer, a sharp knock echoed through the door, making us both jump. It was my best friend Alex, who had tagged along for moral support. Her usually cheerful face was etched with concern. "Hey, I saw the lights on and thought I'd check in," she said, hovering in the doorway. Her eyes landed on the screen, and her expression shifted from concern to confusion. "What's going on?" Mr. Thompson hesitated before speaking. "There's a hidden frame in this VHS tape. It's not part of the original film. The girl in it, she's not Judy Garland." Alex stepped closer, peering at the screen. "She looks scared. And that message, 'Help me, I'm still here.' That's creepy." I felt a chill run down my spine. "I need to know who she is. Maybe she's an actress from back then?" Mr. Thompson shook his head, I don't recognize her. It's like she's been added in later, but the quality doesn't match any modern editing. This is old, like from the same time as the film. Just then my phone buzzed. It was my grandmother's sister, Aunt Lucy. She had called earlier, sounding frantic, but I had put her off, unsure how much to reveal. "I need to take this," I said, stepping outside. The cold evening air hit me as I answered. Aunt Lucy's voice was trembling. "I know about the tape. I know what you found." My heart raced. "What do you know?" There was a pause, filled by the distant howl of wind. "Your grandmother, she wouldn't let anyone watch that tape. She said it was cursed." Before I could press her further, the line went dead. I stood there, the phone slipping from my hand as a shadow moved behind me. Spinning around, I saw nothing but the dim outlines of trees. Returning inside, I found Alex and Mr. Thompson deep in conversation. "I think we need to look into the history of the film," Alex suggested. "There might be some urban legend or curse." Mr. Thompson nodded. "I remember hearing rumors about a set worker who vanished during filming. No one knows what happened to her." As we left, the weight of the tape in my bag felt heavier. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every creak of the house made me jump. Then I heard it, a low, mournful sigh that sounded like Toto. But my dog, Max, was fast asleep beside me. The next morning, I decided to visit the old film lot. The address led me to an abandoned area, overgrown with weeds. No sign of the soundstage remained, just a faded sign that read Studio 13. Back home, I found a letter from my grandmother, tucked away in an old photo album. It spoke of a girl named Emily, who had worked on the set and vanished. She was never found, and my grandmother had always felt a lingering presence, as if Emily was still there. That night, as I sat in the dim light, the TV flickered on by itself. The VHS tape was in the player, and the room filled with static. On the screen, Emily appeared, her eyes black as coal, her voice a whisper. "You shouldn't have watched." Suddenly, Max growled, his fur standing on end. I froze as a shadowy figure coalesced in the corner of the room. Then, everything went black. When I came to, the room was silent. The tape was gone, but on the screen, in red letters, was a message: "I am still here." And then, I heard footsteps. The house that was never there. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement of the old film lot. The air smelled of dust and decay, and the faint hum of distant traffic buzzed like a swarm of bees. I had spent weeks tracking down the location of the infamous MGM soundstage where The Wizard of Oz was filmed. But now, standing in front of the rusty gates, I realized something was off. The sign that should have read MGM Studios was gone, replaced by a faded placard that said private property. "Do not enter." I pushed through the gates, my sneakers crunching on the gravel. The lot was eerily quiet, save for the occasional chirp of a bird or the creak of old wooden beams in the wind. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from my best friend Sam, who had been helping me dig into the history of the film. "Be careful," she had texted earlier. "If this place is really cursed, you don't want to mess with it." But I had to know the truth. The more I learned about the strange occurrences surrounding the Wizard of Oz, the more I felt a pull, like an invisible string tugging me closer to something I couldn't quite see. According to the stories I'd uncovered, the cast and crew of The Wizard of Oz had experienced bizarre happenings during filming. Margaret Hamilton, the actress who played the Wicked Witch of the West, had suffered severe burns during a pyrotechnic mishap. One of the actors playing a flying monkey had fallen to his death. And then there was the rumor of a set worker, a young woman named Elizabeth, who had vanished during filming. No one knew what happened to her, and her name didn't appear in any official records. I walked past a row of dilapidated buildings, their windows shattered, their walls covered in graffiti. The farther I went, the heavier the air felt, like something was pressing down on my shoulders. I could feel eyes on me, but every time I turned, there was no one there. Finally, I came to a stop in front of a sprawling, decaying structure that looked like it might have once been a soundstage. The walls were covered in ivy, and the roof sagged under the weight of years of neglect. I pushed open the creaking door, and a musty smell hit me like a punch to the gut. Inside, the soundstage was dark, illuminated only by slivers of light breaking through the cracked walls. The air was thick with dust, and cobwebs hung like ghostly tapestries from the ceiling. I fumbled in my backpack for a flashlight, and turned it on, the beam cutting through the darkness. The soundstage was empty, save for a few rusted old props and a single rickety chair sitting in the center of the room. I approached it cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. As I shone the light around, I noticed something strange on the walls. Someone had scrawled faint messages in red paint. "She is still here," one read. "Elizabeth never left," another said. I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. "Who's there?" I called out, but the only response was the echo of my own voice off the walls. I took a step back, my hand trembling as I held the flashlight steady. Suddenly I heard a noise, a faint whisper, like someone was calling my name. I froze, my blood running cold. "Hello? Fine," I said again, my voice barely above a whisper. The whisper grew louder, more urgent, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I turned to leave, but as I did, I saw something that made my heart stop. On the far wall, written in the same red paint, was a single sentence: "You shouldn't have come here." I didn't wait to see anything else. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing through the empty soundstage as I bolted back toward the entrance. The whispers followed me, growing louder, more insistent, until I felt like I was being pulled back into the darkness. I didn't stop running until I was back in my car, the doors locked, and the engine roaring to life. As I sped away from the film lot, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a split second, I thought I saw a figure standing in the doorway of the soundstage, a woman in a long tattered dress, her face pale and gaunt. But when I looked again, she was gone. That night I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every creak of the house, every groan of the wind made me jump. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, but deep down I knew better. Whatever was in that soundstage, whatever had happened to Elizabeth all those years ago, it wasn't just a story. And now I had stirred it up. As I lay in bed, my mind racing, I heard a faint whisper in my ear. "You should have never watched." I sat up with a jolt, my heart racing, but the room was empty. The TV was off, the house silent, but the words lingered in my mind, echoing over and over, until I couldn't tell what was real and what was just a product of my imagination. Was I losing my grip on reality, or was something truly sinister at play? I didn't have the answer, but I knew one thing for sure: I was no longer alone. And whatever was watching me from the shadows, it wasn't going away. The man in the tin mask. It started with the whispers. At first they were faint, barely audible over the hum of the house at night. I told myself it was just the wind or the creaks and groans of an old building settling. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The words were too clear, too intentional, though I couldn't make out what they were saying. It sounded like a crowd of people murmuring in unison, their voices overlapping in a way that made my skin crawl. I tried to ignore it, throwing myself into research, scouring the internet for any mention of the strange VHS tape or the disturbing scenes it contained. But the more I dug, the more I realized how little I knew. Theories about alternate realities and cursed objects swirled in my head, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was something far more sinister. Then one night, I woke up to the sound of static. My heart raced as I sat up in bed, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. The TV in my room was on, its flickering light casting eerie shadows on the walls. I could have sworn I turned it off before going to bed. "Turn it off," I muttered to myself, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. But as I stood, I froze. The screen wasn't showing the same distorted, glitchy footage as before. It was showing something else entirely. The Tin Man stood alone on the screen, his metallic body gleaming in the dim light of what looked like a dark abandoned set. His face, usually expressionless, was tilted slightly downward, as if he were staring at something on the ground. But it was his mask that caught my attention. It seemed different. The edges were jagged, almost sharp, and the silver surface was tarnished, streaked with something dark that looked like rust. The whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a storm. My hands were shaking as I reached for the remote, but when I pressed the buttons, nothing happened. The TV wouldn't turn off. It wouldn't even change the channel. All I could do was watch. And then, the Tin Man moved. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his head and looked directly into the camera. His eyes, usually hollow and unfeeling, seemed to bore into mine. I could feel his gaze like a weight on my chest, pressing down until it was hard to breathe. Suddenly, his mask began to shift. It wasn't subtle. It twisted and bent, the metal warping like molten plastic. I heard a sound, like the screech of metal scraping against metal, and then, in a flash of movement, the mask split open. Beneath it was a face. Not the smooth, empty face I expected, but something else entirely. It was human. Or at least, it had once been human. The skin was gray and decaying, stretched taut over sharp cheekbones. The eyes were sunken in black, and the mouth was twisted into a grimace. Wires poked out from the edges, gleaming with a faint, unnatural light. The face didn't belong to the Tin Man. It belonged to someone else, someone who had been trapped beneath the mask all along. I stumbled backward, my legs hitting the bed and sending me tumbling onto the mattress. My heart was pounding in my ears, and my mind raced with questions I didn't want to answer. Who was this person? How did they end up inside the Tin Man's mask? And why was this scene playing on my TV in the middle of the night? As I watched, frozen in horror, the face beneath the mask began to move. The mouth opened, revealing crooked, yellowed teeth, and a sound came from it. A low, guttural growl that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. The Tin Man's body began to twitch, his limbs jerking in unnatural ways, as if he were being controlled by an invisible force. I wanted to scream, to run out of the room, but my body wouldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to tear my eyes away from the screen. The whispers around me grew louder, more urgent, until they became a cacophony of sound that filled my head. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The TV screen flickered once, twice, and then went black. The whispers ceased. The room was silent. I sat there for what felt like hours, my heart pounding, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to destroy the VHS tape, to burn it and scatter the ashes. But another part of me was curious. What else was on that tape? What other secrets was it hiding? As I finally gathered the courage to stand, I noticed something else. My cat Bella was sitting on the windowsill, her eyes fixed intently on the TV. She was usually a skittish animal, but now she seemed calm, almost watching. "Bella?" I said, my voice shaking. "What are you doing?" She turned her head and looked at me, her green eyes glowing faintly in the dark. For a moment, I could swear she understood me. But then she blinked, and the moment was gone. She hopped down from the sill and padded out of the room, her tail flicking behind her. I let out a shaky breath and reached for my phone. I needed to talk to someone, anyone, who could help me make sense of what was happening. But as I scrolled through my contacts, I realized that there was no one I could trust with this. My friends would think I was crazy. My family, well, my grandmother was gone, and I wasn't sure I wanted to drag anyone else into this nightmare. I tossed the phone onto the bed and walked over to the TV. The screen was cold to the touch, but I could still feel the weight of what I had seen lingering in the air. I turned the TV off manually, unplugging it just to be sure, and then I sat back down on the bed, my mind racing. Who was that face beneath the Tin Man's mask? And why was this happening to me? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing. I had to get to the bottom of this. I couldn't keep living in fear, wondering what was real and what wasn't. I needed to uncover the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. And with that, I made a decision. I would confront whatever was on that tape head-on. I would watch it to the end, no matter what horrors it held. Because the only way to escape this nightmare was to face it directly. But as I lay back on the bed trying to calm my racing thoughts, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The TV was off, the room was quiet, but the weight of those eyes on me was still there, lingering in the darkness. And then, just as I was starting to drift off to sleep, I heard it again. The sound of static. The faint murmur of whispers. This time, they were clearer. This time I could make out the words. The final twist. The movie that watches you back. The room was dark, save for the faint moonlight filtering through the curtains. The air was thick with tension as I stood before the fireplace, the cursed VHS tape in my hands. My heart raced with each crackle of the flames, but the tape wouldn't burn. It seemed to mock me, intact and unscathed. Frustration boiled over, and with a scream, I hurled the remote at the TV, shattering the screen into a spiderweb of cracks. But as I approached, my breath caught. The reflection in the broken glass wasn't mine. It was Dorothy's, her smile twisted and sinister. The TV roared to life, its speakers crackling with static. I froze as Dorothy stood at the crossroads, her eyes locked on mine. "You should have never watched," she hissed, her voice echoing in my mind. The screen flickered and died, plunging the room into silence. But the stillness was short-lived. Footsteps echoed from the hallway, light, deliberate, and getting closer. My cat, Mr. Whiskers, who had been hiding under the bed, darted out with a frightened meow, vanishing into the shadows. I tried to call out, but my voice caught in my throat. The footsteps paused outside my door, then resumed, each creak of the floor amplifying my terror. My mind raced, questioning my sanity. Was this real, or was I succumbing to grief and stress? The door creaked open. I spun around, but there was no one there. The TV flickered again, showing Dorothy in a desolate field, her hand waving slowly. Behind her, the Tin Man's mask shifted, revealing a rotting face. I screamed, but the sound was drowned out by the TV's roar. Suddenly, the TV went black. The room was still. I collapsed on the floor, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The footsteps had stopped. Then I heard Mr. Whiskers' low growl, his eyes fixed on something across the room. I turned, but the darkness was absolute. The air felt heavy, oppressive. And then, a whisper, Dorothy's voice, caressed my ear. "You should have never watched." Everything went black. When I woke up, the room was bathed in morning light. The TV was off. The tape lay shattered on the floor. I was alone. But as I looked at the broken screen, I could have sworn I saw Dorothy's smile lingering, a haunting reminder that some horrors never end. The footsteps never came again, but the fear remained, a constant shadow in my mind. And sometimes in the dead of night, I swear I hear Dorothy's whisper, a chilling echo of a terror that watches and waits. The man who died twice. I never believed in conspiracy theories. Doppelgangers. People being replaced. The idea was ludicrous. The stuff of late-night horror movies and whispered internet forums. Until I saw my own death announced online. It began as a morbid joke. My friend Jacob, a notorious prankster with a penchant for the macabre, sent me a screenshot. A grainy image of a news article from over a decade ago, a headline proclaiming the death of someone with my name, my face, my exact identity staring back at me from the faded pixels. Initially I laughed. Someone with the same name, right? A crazy coincidence. But Jacob, his usual jovial tone absent, sent another screenshot. An obituary this time, more detailed, specifying a tragic car accident on a rainy Tuesday in October, a date I vaguely remembered but couldn't place. Then came the Reddit thread, a digital graveyard of comments from 2010, a chilling chorus of strangers claiming to remember my funeral. I swear I remember this guy dying. There was even a memorial page. One wrote, "No, you're right. Didn't he die in a car crash?" Another chimed in, "No, it was a suicide." I remember because we had a moment of silence for him in school. A cold dread seeped into my bones. I was alive. I'd never been in a car crash. Suicide was even further from my mind. Yet, as I scrolled, a sickening realization dawned. These strangers knew things about my life, seemingly insignificant details that they shouldn't have, things I'd forgotten, buried deep within the recesses of my memory. A childhood fear of spiders, the chip paint on the windowsill of my old bedroom, a love for a specific, obscure band. Then came the comment that truly shattered my reality. A user named TheWatcher86, their profile long dormant, had posted, almost 15 years prior. He does not know yet, but he will soon. He was replaced. That was last night. This morning, staring into the mirror, something felt off. A subtle shift in the angle of my jaw, a faint asymmetry I'd never noticed before. My reflection seemed wrong, distorted. And then, across the street, from my third-floor apartment window, I saw him. Me. He stood there, a perfect mirror image, but with an unsettling stillness in his eyes, a disturbing emptiness in his expression. A cold shiver ran down my spine, accompanied by a loud thump of my heart. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared, a silent, unnerving observer. My mother, usually a calming presence, seemed strangely distant, her eyes holding a flicker of fear I couldn't quite decipher whenever I brought up the online articles. My father, a stern, stoic man, refused to discuss it entirely. My dog Buster, a normally boisterous golden retriever, whimpered nervously whenever my doppelganger was mentioned. Even the chipped paint on the windowsill of my childhood bedroom seemed different, more chipped. Old home videos, once cherished memories, now flickered and distorted when I played them. One entire video was missing, my 7th birthday party. My high school yearbook photo had a suspiciously blurred out face where mine should have been. Was this a glitch in the system? Or a deliberate act of erasure? The chilling truth started to settle in. My life felt borrowed. Was I a meticulously crafted imitation, a replacement for someone who died 15 years ago? And if so, who was the original? And more importantly, why me? The feeling of being watched intensified. The unsettling feeling of someone being in the room even when I was alone. Sometimes I wonder if I was losing my mind, questioning if I had schizophrenia, the constant hallucination and paranoia, making it harder to differentiate between reality and delusion. There were times I was ready to give up and hand myself to the authorities for mental appraisal. Then, down in the basement, amongst dusty boxes and forgotten memories, I found it. A locked wooden box. Inside, an old newspaper clipping, the obituary, a death certificate, signed, official, dated 15 years ago. And in the margins, scrawled in my father's shaky handwriting, "We got him back, but it is not him." The mirror now showed a scar above my left eyebrow, one I'd never seen before. My eye color seemed slightly different in old photos. The line between reality and illusion was blurring, dissolving into a terrifying uncertainty. One night, I woke to find my reflection staring back at me, smiling. A sinister, knowing smile that wasn't my own. I was not alone. As I stood in the rain-soaked backyard of my childhood home, a fresh grave lay before me, the tombstone blank, my family inside, and another me staring back at me from the window. A chilling realization came over me. My reflection wasn't just watching, it was coming for me. And this time, it wouldn't be leaving. The voice behind me whispered, "You were never supposed to wake up." The last thing I saw were those hands reaching for my throat. The ping of my phone sliced through the quiet hum of the refrigerator. It was Jacob, my best friend since kindergarten. His text message a single, unsettling screenshot. A grainy image of a news article, dated October 27th, 2010, screamed across the screen. Local man, Elias Thorne, perishes in tragic car accident. My name, Elias Thorne. My face, blurry but undeniably mine, stared back at me from the tiny thumbnail. My initial reaction was laughter. Dude? Seriously? I texted back. Some other Elias Thorne, maybe. There are tons of us. Jacob's reply was just another screenshot, this time an obituary. A more recent post from a now-defunct forum called Remember When. The picture was clearer. It was me, or a version of me, younger, with a slightly different haircut. The accompanying text detailed a funeral service, a plot in Greenhaven Cemetery, even listing my supposed surviving family members. My mother, Sarah Thorne, accurate. A father, Richard Thorne, deceased, yes. But I hadn't thought about it in years. And even my old pug, Winston, also deceased. But I'd felt too personal for this to be a coincidence. A chill prickled my skin. It was getting colder, far colder than this late summer night deserved to be. I scrolled through the comments. I swear I remember this guy dying. There was even a memorial page. One user wrote, "No, you're right. Didn't he die in a car crash?" replied another. "No, it was a suicide, I remember, because we had a moment of silence for him in school," chimed in a third. The comments grew more frantic, more detailed. Strangers recalled specific details of my life. Details I'd forgotten or suppressed. A childhood fear of thunderstorms. A recurring dream involving a shadowy figure. An incident involving my old dog, Winston, and a broken fence. A wave of nausea rolled over me. These weren't just vague recollections. They were specific, deeply personal events. Events I'd buried deep. I felt like someone was digging up my past, tearing out my memories, piece by piece. Then I saw it. A comment from a user named Thwatcher86, posted nearly 15 years ago, hidden amongst a torrent of other comments. He does not know yet, but he will soon. He was replaced. That was last night. This morning I stared at my reflection. Something felt off. My eyes seemed a shade lighter, my jawline sharper. It was subtle, but a disquiet settled in my gut, a cold, creeping dread. And then I saw him. Across the street, in the reflection of my neighbor's window, stood a man. He was identical to me. The same height, the same build, the same hair. But there was a slight difference in his expression, a subtle asymmetry in his features, a coldness that made my breath hitch in my throat. He was watching me with unnerving intensity. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum beat against the sudden terrifying silence. What he was looking at, I was sure of, was not actually me. It was something else. He was me, but he wasn't. And I suddenly knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my life was a lie. Or at least, parts of it were. A lie I was only now beginning to unearth. I spent the entire day glued to my computer screen, researching false memories and internet hoaxes. I stumbled upon countless theories about replacements, celebrities and ordinary people being swapped with lookalikes. My heart raced as I read through the stories, but nothing prepared me for what I found next. As evening approached, my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. "You were not supposed to find out." I jumped back, dropping my phone on the floor. I quickly picked it up, my hands shaking as I read the message again. I felt a chill run down my spine, and my thoughts raced. Who could it be? My enemy? A prankster? Or something more sinister? I tried to shake off the feeling of being watched, but I couldn't help but glance around the room. The shadows seemed to move in the corner of my eye, and I heard whispers in the wind. I decided to call my older brother, Alex, for help. He was a journalist and had experience dealing with strange and unexplained events. I explained the situation to him, and he promised to look into it. Hours passed, and I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. I decided to take a break and went for a walk with my dog, Max. The cool night air felt good on my skin, and I tried to clear my head. As we walked, I noticed a figure standing in the distance, watching me. My heart skipped a beat, and I froze. The figure looked exactly like me. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was seeing things, but when I looked again, it was still there. I quickly ran back home, Max following closely behind. I locked the door and drew the curtains, trying to calm down. I couldn't believe what I had just seen. My phone buzzed again and I jumped. It was another message from the unknown number. "We're watching you." I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I needed to talk to someone, anyone. I called my best friend, Sarah, and told her everything. She listened quietly, and then suggested that I might be suffering from schizophrenia. "It's possible," she said. "False memories and seeing things that aren't there are symptoms of schizophrenia. Maybe you should talk to a doctor." I hung up, feeling confused and alone. Was I going crazy? Was this all in my head? I decided to look up the symptoms of schizophrenia, and sure enough, I found several that matched my situation. I felt a sense of relief, but also fear. If this was all in my head, then what could I do to make it stop? I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up, staring at the shadows, waiting for something to happen. And then, just as the sun began to rise, I heard a noise coming from my basement. It sounded like someone was down there, moving things around. I grabbed a baseball bat and slowly made my way down the stairs. The basement was dark and damp, and I could barely see anything. I flicked on the light switch, and that's when I saw it. A locked box, sitting in the corner of the room. I approached it slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I unlocked the box and opened it. Inside, I found an old newspaper clipping, the obituary with my name, a death certificate, signed, official, dated 15 years ago, and in the margins, scrawled in my father's handwriting, "We got him back, but it is not him." I stumbled back, dropping the box. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what I had just seen. And then, I heard it. A voice, whispering my name. I turned around, and that's when I saw it. My reflection, staring back at me. But it wasn't me. It was someone else. Someone who looked exactly like me. And then, it spoke. "Let me come back," it said. I screamed, dropping the bat. I turned to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I felt a hand on my shoulder, and I turned around. It was me, but it wasn't. The doppelganger grinned, its eyes glowing with a sinister light. "I am not me," it said. And then, everything went black. The feeling started subtly. A prickling at the back of my neck, a persistent sense of being observed. It wasn't paranoia. I'd never suffered from anything like that before. But now, shadows seemed to stretch longer. My usually placid golden retriever Gus started whimpering at night, his usually calm brown eyes wide with an unsettling fear. Even my normally unflappable mother, a woman who could field any crisis with a perfectly brewed cup of tea, seemed on edge. My reflection in the mirror, once a familiar sight, now held a hint of unease. It wasn't just the lingering suspicion that something was fundamentally wrong. It was the feeling that the reflection was slightly different each time I looked. A flicker in the eyes, a subtle shift in the angle of my jaw. The rational part of my brain screamed, "You're tired, stressed. It's all in your head." But a cold dread snaked its way through me, wrapping itself around my heart like icy tendrils. Then came the night. It was a Tuesday. Rain lashed against the windows, a relentless drumming that mirrored the chaotic rhythm of my pounding heart. I was staring at my laptop, scrolling through old forums, the Reddit threads still echoing in my mind, a symphony of ghostly memories and forgotten details. Suddenly, a movement caught my eye. Across the street, Under the weak glow of a flickering street lamp stood a figure. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow playing games with my already frayed nerves. But as the rain momentarily eased, the figure solidified. It was me. Or rather, someone who looked exactly like me. Same height, same build, same posture, a near-perfect mirror image. But there was something off. The face was subtly different. The way the light glinted off the cheekbone was wrong. The eyes, though the same color, held a coldness, a chilling emptiness that sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just a doppelganger, it was a meticulously crafted imitation, yet subtly altered, like a flawed copy. My breath hitched in my throat. A strangled gasp escaped my lips, a sound swallowed by the downpour. The figure remained motionless, its gaze locked on mine. Terror, cold and sharp, pierced through me. This isn't real, I told myself. But the blood ran cold in my veins. I stumbled back from the window, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Panic seized me, a raw, animalistic urge to escape. I grabbed my phone, its cold metal, a small comfort in my clammy hand. I needed to call someone, anyone, Jacob, my mother, even the police. But as I reached for the dial pad, the figure moved. It turned, slowly, deliberately, and melted into the shadows. I flung open the front door, rain instantly soaking my clothes. I ran, blindly, across the street, desperate to get closer, to confront the creature that looked so much like me, yet held a chilling essence of something alien and utterly horrifying. But when I reached the spot where the figure had stood, there was nothing. No one. Just the relentless rain and the whispering wind that seemed to mock my terror. Back in my house, shivering and soaked, I felt the weight of a terrifying certainty settle upon me. The man in the window wasn't just a figment of my imagination. He was real, and he was watching. The feeling of being watched intensified, becoming more than a mere sensation. It was a living presence that clung to me, a cold, suffocating weight. Even Gus, curled up at my feet, trembled, his whimpers growing louder, echoing my own unspoken fear. The rain outside continued its relentless drumming, a morbid soundtrack to my growing dread. I was alone, and something or someone was out there. Much more. The chipped ceramic mug warmed my hands, the lukewarm tea doing little to soothe the icy dread that had taken root in my gut. Jacob's texts, the screenshots of my supposed death, the chilling Reddit thread, haunted me. I needed answers, and those answers, I feared, lay buried deep within the dusty recesses of my own past. My gaze fell on an old wooden box tucked away in the attic. It held relics of my childhood, worn teddy bears, faded photographs, and a dusty yearbook from my senior year of high school. As I flipped through the brittle pages, a gasp escaped my lips. My senior picture, my face was blurred, a smudged, indistinct oval where my smiling countenance should have been. The yearbook's editor had clearly tried to cover it, awkwardly rephotographing the page and leaving behind a crude digital patch. A knot of unease tightened my chest. This wasn't some simple editing mistake. It felt deliberate, like a careful effort to erase me from that year. My mother, usually a fountain of anecdotes and memories, was strangely evasive when I showed her the yearbook. She stared at the blurred photo, her eyes widening slightly. Her usual cheerful demeanor had vanished, replaced by a strained, almost fearful expression. A silence hung heavy in the air before she finally whispered, her voice barely audible, You weren't well back then. Very unwell." Her words sent a chill down my spine. Unwell? What hadn't she told me? What illness had ravaged me so thoroughly that even my own image had to be obscured from history? That night, I delved into our family's collection of home videos. Most played smoothly, capturing snapshots of my childhood, family vacations, awkward school plays, holiday gatherings. My childhood dog, Buster, a goofy golden retriever, bounced around in those videos, a furry, happy blur. My younger sister, Sarah, and I were inseparable in those recordings, our laughter echoing through the room. Even my now estranged father, a man with a perpetually furrowed brow and harsh words, had a softer expression in those old home movies. But as I searched for answers, the videos started glitching. Static crackled through the screen. Images flickered, frames skipping erratically. Colors bled together, faces twisting into grotesque parodies of themselves. Then I found an empty space on the shelf, where a video labeled "Your Last Birthday" should have been. Gone. Vanished. No trace of it existed anywhere. Panic tightened its grip around my heart. The missing video, the blurred photo, my mother's cryptic words, they all pointed towards a gaping hole in my memory. A missing year that felt like a dark abyss yawning open in my past. Over the next few days, the glitches worsened. Not just on the home videos, but in my own memories. Fragments of images, sounds, and sensations would flash through my mind. A fleeting vision of a dark room, the metallic tang of blood, a whispered voice I couldn't quite place. Then, just as quickly, they would vanish, leaving behind only a lingering sense of unease and a growing suspicion that my reality was crumbling. My reflection in the mirror became a source of both fascination and horror. One morning I noticed a small faint scar above my left eyebrow, a scar I had never seen before, a mark that wasn't reflected in any of my older photos. My eyes felt different too, slightly deeper set, the color not quite the same shade of hazel I always remembered. Was I losing my mind? Was this the onset of schizophrenia? Was I already replaced? Or was something far more sinister at play? The missing year, this year of my life that didn't seem to exist, was a chilling reminder that my past, my very identity, was not as stable or reliable as I had always believed. The truth was hidden somewhere in the shadows of my forgotten memories. And the more I dug, the more I feared what I might find. The chipped porcelain sink felt cold against my cheek as I stared at my reflection. It had started subtly, a flicker of unease, a feeling of wrongness that clung to me like a damp shroud. Now the unease had blossomed into full-blown terror. Last night, it was the scar. A thin, pale line just above my left eyebrow, barely visible unless the light hit it just right. I'd never had a scar there. I'd never even had a close call that could have caused one. I ran my finger over it, the skin smooth, a little raised, undeniably real. This morning, it was my eyes. I pulled out an old photo, a blurry snapshot from my 10th birthday, a party at my Aunt Mildred's house, a lifetime ago. My Aunt Mildred, bless her soul, passed away a couple of years back. A good woman, who always said I had my father's hazel eyes. But in that photo, my eyes seemed lighter, a shade closer to the pale, almost gray-blue I'd seen in that fleeting glimpse of my doppelganger across the street. The change wasn't drastic, not something you'd notice at a glance. It was the kind of subtle shift that only a parent or longtime friend would pick up on. It was like watching a slow leak, the drip, drip, drip of something precious draining away. My phone buzzed, a text from Jacob. "Dude, you okay? You look off. In the last few photos you sent, your eyes, they seem." He trailed off, then added, "Different." My stomach churned. It wasn't just my eyes. It was a creeping sense of displacement, as though I was wearing someone else's skin. A poorly fitted suit that stretched and pulled in all the wrong places. My reflection blinked. I swear it blinked. I blinked back, my heart hammering against my ribs. The image in the mirror seemed to waver, as though the surface was rippling. The scar above my eye seemed to deepen, lengthen. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my throat. The sensation was indescribable, a horrifying mix of strangulation and disorientation. My breathing hitched, a ragged gasp escaping my lips. It felt like my lungs were full of water, each intake of air desperate, painful struggle. My reflection laughed. Not a sound, not exactly, but a silent, terrible mirth that twisted and distorted the features in the mirror. A ripple, a flicker, and the face in the mirror wasn't mine anymore. It was sharper, colder, more like the man across the street. The dog Buster, my scruffy terrier mix, whimpered and pressed against my leg. Even he seemed to sense the change, the unsettling shift in the atmosphere. Buster, my faithful companion for 15 years, usually so boisterous, was unusually quiet, his tail tucked low. He wasn't afraid of much, but this felt different. I fled the bathroom, my pulse a frantic drum solo. I needed to talk to someone, anyone, but who could I trust? My mother? She'd always been a little peculiar. And what about my father? He died when I was young, a tragic accident, or so I'd always believed. His absence hung over me, a silent weight. Even my childhood friend Sarah hadn't called or texted back since I shared Jacob's messages and my growing apprehension. There was something about this mystery, a suffocating dread that was slowly unraveling me. It was as if my entire life was based on a lie. The hallway mirror reflected my racing heart, my terror-stricken eyes. But this time, it wasn't my face staring back. It was a shadow of a face. The scar was more pronounced. The eyes, colder, emptier. And then, the mouth smiled. A truly horrifying, chilling smile that had nothing to do with happiness, and everything to do with something far more sinister. A smile that belonged not to me, but to something else, something lurking just behind the surface. The smile spread, and I knew with terrifying certainty that I was not alone. That something, or someone, was trying to get in. The air in the basement hung thick and cold, a damp chill clinging to my skin like a shroud. Dust motes danced in the single beam of my flashlight, illuminating cobwebs that draped the forgotten relics like macabre lace. My childhood home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a tomb. My parents were away. A much-needed vacation they'd insisted on after. Everything. I needed answers, and I had a feeling this forgotten corner held them. My grandfather's old workbench stood sentinel in one corner, its surface covered in a layer of grime. Next to it, half hidden behind a stack of moth-eaten blankets, was a small wooden box. Its surface was scratched and worn, bound with rusted metal clasps. A cold dread, colder than the basement air, settled in my stomach. The clasps creaked open with a sound like rusty hinges of a coffin. Inside, nestled amongst yellowed newspaper clippings and faded photographs, lay a small, official-looking envelope. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum beat against the silence. Inside the envelope was a death certificate. My name, my date of birth, the cause of death listed as undetermined. The date, October 27th, 2008. 15 years ago. A cold wave washed over me, leaving me shivering even in the damp chill. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't some elaborate internet hoax. This was real. Next to the certificate, tucked beneath a brittle photograph of my childhood dog, Buster, who I'd barely remembered until recently, was a newspaper clipping. It was the same obituary that had started this nightmare. The picture was blurred, strangely, almost like someone had tried to scratch it out, leaving only a faint impression of a face that looked unnervingly familiar. Yet, not quite like me. Scrawled in the margins of the clipping, in my father's familiar, spidery handwriting, was a chilling note. We got him back, but it is not him. My breath hitched. Who was him? Who had been gotten back? And was I not me? Panic, sharp and cold as an icicle, pierced the growing fog in my mind. My phone buzzed. A text from Jacob, but, "Dude, you okay? I found something. An old home video of you from 2008. It's weird. You don't look like you." A wave of nausea overwhelmed me. I needed to get out of the basement, away from this tangible proof of something utterly unbelievable. As I clutched the death certificate, a floorboard groaned behind me. I whirled around, flashlight beam dancing nervously across the shadows. The darkness seemed to press in, suffocating. A scratching sound, like claws on wood, echoed from behind the workbench. My breath caught in my throat. Was it a rat? Or something else? Something watching. I ran. Upstairs, back into the comforting light of the main house, the fear still clung to me like a second skin. My heart pounded like a frantic bird trapped in a cage. The cold certainty that something was terribly, terribly wrong settled in my bones. I had to understand. I had to know who I was, or rather, who I wasn't. My reflection in the hallway mirror seemed to shift, flicker, a subtle distortion that made my skin crawl. Even my reflection seemed to be questioning my identity. And somewhere beyond my sanity, a voice whispered, a chilling echo from the inky depths of the basement. "He knows." The notification pinged on my phone, a jarring sound in the otherwise silent apartment. It was a message from Sarah, a childhood friend I hadn't spoken to in years. The last time we'd properly connected was during a disastrous high school talent show where my attempt at a magic trick went horribly wrong. A dove escaped, pooping on the principal's freshly pressed suit. The memory made me wince, even now. But Sarah's message wasn't about doves. "Saw the obituary," she wrote, her words stark against the bright screen. Is that you?" My heart hammered against my ribs. The obituary. The Reddit thread. It wasn't just a strange internet anomaly anymore. A real person was acknowledging it. I typed back, a shaky string of words. "It's a long story. Meet me at the old oak tree by the creek. Tomorrow, noon?" The next day the air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and pine needles. The old oak tree, its gnarled branches reaching towards the sky like skeletal fingers, stood sentinel over the creek. Sarah arrived, her face etched with worry. She looked older than her 30 years, her eyes shadowed with a weariness I recognized. It mirrored my own. She didn't beat around the bush. "It's you, isn't it? The obituary. I remember your funeral." She swallowed her Adam's apple, bobbing nervously. Or at least I thought I did. It's fuzzy, like a dream I can't quite grasp. I remember the flowers, white lilies mostly, and the rain. It rained that day. I told her everything. The online posts, the comments, the chilling message from the Watcher 86 dial. As I spoke, I noticed a flicker of understanding, then a chilling certainty in her eyes. "There were always things," she whispered. "Things that didn't quite add up. Remember how you used to talk about a shadow in your room? A tall, dark figure that would stand at the foot of your bed? You'd describe it with such detail. Its cold breath, the way it felt like it was stealing your warmth. Then one day, you stopped talking about it completely." I racked my brain. The memory was faint, a blurry impression of terror and whispered pleas in the dark. But it was there, a chilling echo from a forgotten past. "And your dog, Buster?" Sarah continued, her voice barely a breath. "He was always so terrified of you that last year of grade school. He would whimper and hide whenever you were around. You said he was scared of your shadow. Remember when Mr. Henderson, our grumpy neighbor, screamed at you, claiming you were not the same after he saw you walking your dog? Then, just as quickly, he apologized and said he was mistaken. Buster, the memory of the scruffy terrier, once my loyal companion, surfaced, tinged with a strange uncertainty. I remembered a deep primal fear in his eyes, a fear that transcended ordinary dog behavior, a fear that resonated with the forgotten terror in my own soul. It was like, Sarah concluded, her voice catching, like you were replaced. One day you were my best friend, the next you weren't. You were different. Cold? Your laugh wasn't the same. You forgot things. You even forgot how to play our favorite board game, Monopoly. Like all the rules were completely foreign to you. No. Her words were a cold splash of water on my face, shattering the fragile hope I had clung to. The missing memories, the distorted videos, the blurring of faces in old photos. It all pointed to something more sinister than a hoax, something terrifyingly real. I had a feeling, a dreadful premonition, that the nightmare was only just beginning. The other one, as the cryptic message suggested, was still out there, and it wanted something, or someone. And that someone, I increasingly felt, was me. Or, perhaps, what was left of me. The attic air hung thick with dust motes dancing in the lone beam of the flashlight. A tremor ran through Alex as he sifted through the decaying cardboard boxes, the scent of aged paper and forgotten memories filling his nostrils. He'd spent the last few days in a haze of dread, the online obituaries and the doppelganger across the street twisting his reality into a grotesque funhouse mirror. His normally organized mind felt fractured, like a dropped plate of china. He was clinging to any shred of normalcy, any clue that could unravel this nightmare. Then he found it, a small leather-bound journal, its pages brittle with age. The familiar childish scrawl on the cover was his own. He'd barely remembered keeping a journal as a child. His parents had always been distant. His mother, a quiet, almost ethereal woman, had suffered from bouts of depression that cast a long shadow over his childhood. His father, a stern, imposing man, had been consumed by his work, a distant figure who rarely interacted with him. His only real companion had been Buster, his scruffy terrier, who passed away when he was 10. Now, even the comforting memory of Buster felt tainted. He flipped through the pages, each entry a snapshot of a forgotten life. Birthday parties blurred, school projects half remembered. But as he neared the end, the entries became darker, more frantic. He recognized a sudden shift in his handwriting. The letters became less neat, almost trembling. Then the final entry. Mom said everything will be okay now. I do not feel like me anymore. The stark simplicity of the words hit him like a physical blow. A chill, deeper than the attic's cold air, snaked down his spine. He clutched the journal tighter, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He remembered glimpses of this feeling, a profound sense of alienation, of being an outsider in his own life, a feeling of displacement that was now so intense it threatened to consume him. He stared at the words, a cold dread settling in his gut. His mother had said everything would be okay. What had happened? What had she done? He slammed the journal shut, a sudden sharp clang echoing in the silent attic. The flashlight slipped from his numb fingers, plunging him into darkness. As he fumbled for the light, a low growl echoed, closer than the attic's usual nocturnal creatures. He froze, his breath catching in his throat. A pair of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, 2 points of malevolent light burning into him. It sounded like Buster's growl, but it held a predatory edge that made the hairs on the back of his neck prickle. He scrambled out of the attic, his heart pounding in his chest. The house felt different, the familiar creaks and groans now infused with menace. He stumbled down the stairs, the silence heavy with unspoken dread, and collapsed into his bed, exhausted and terrified. He closed his eyes, trying to sleep, but the image of those eyes stayed with him. Then he felt it, a slow, creeping sensation of being observed. His eyes snapped open. He wasn't alone in the room. His reflection stared back at him from the mirror. But it wasn't just a reflection. It was him, but wrong. Subtle differences, a slightly crooked smile, eyes that held a cold intelligence, an unsettling stillness in its gaze. A thin scar, tracing a faint line across its cheekbone, was something he'd never seen before. His real body lay peacefully asleep in the bed, a testament to the uncanny disconnect he was experiencing. The doppelganger in the mirror leaned closer, its lips curving into a chilling smirk. then spoke, its voice a low, guttural whisper that only he could hear. "It's time." The room seemed to tilt. The air grew thick with the stench of decay. The floor beneath him felt cold, damp, like the soil of a freshly turned grave. And as the reflection moved, tilted its head, a slow blink, Alex knew that the person in the mirror wasn't him after all. It was something else. Something that wanted out. Something that had been waiting, patiently, for this night to arrive. The chipped porcelain of the bathroom sink felt cold against my cheek. I stared into the mirror, my breath fogging the surface. For a week, the subtle creep had been escalating. The wrongness in my reflection wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was blatant. My reflection moved independently. A slow, almost imperceptible smile played on its lips, even as my own face remained neutral, etched with fear. One minute, my reflection's eyes were the familiar hazel I knew. The next, a flicker of something colder, a steely gray, flashed before the image dissolved back into hazel. It was a trick of the light, I told myself, a figment of my increasingly fractured mind. But the fear, cold and clammy, wrapped around me like a shroud. The doctor had mentioned stress, prescribed some pills, but these felt like tiny pebbles against a landslide. Then came the whispers. At first, just a faint rustling in the back of my mind, like distant static on an old radio. But they grew stronger, clearer, a second voice weaving through my thoughts, mimicking my own internal monologue, yet different, sharper, more confident. It felt like an unwelcome roommate in my head, a parasitic twin. "Let me come back," the voice whispered, so close it vibrated against my eardrums. It wasn't malicious, not yet. More like a plea, a yearning from the other side of a thin veil. The voice knew things, intimate details of my life, memories I had buried deep, locked away in the dusty attics of my mind. There were moments of overlap, sudden flashbacks of childhood that were clearly not my memories. I saw flashes of a girl in a red dress, a girl who was me, but wasn't. She was happier, carefree, laughing with a boy I didn't recognize. A boy with kind eyes and a gentle smile. It felt as though my memories of my own childhood were being overwritten, replaced by her vivid reality. My own memories of my family, my dog, Buster, became fuzzy, indistinct, like a poorly developed photograph. Even Buster seemed to sense the shift. Normally a boisterous golden retriever, he now stayed close, his head resting on my lap, whimpering softly, as if he too recognized the intruder within me. My best friend, Sarah, had noticed the change too. She called, her voice tight with concern. "You're different, Mark. It's like you're not you anymore. You've been withdrawn, distant. Remember that time we went to the lake? You were scared of the water. That's not you. You used to love swimming." Suddenly the fragmented memories collided. The lake, the fear, a terrifying image flashed in my mind. A hand pulling me under, cold, dark water closing over my head. I gasped, clutching my head, the whisper growing stronger. "Let me come back. We belong together." Jacob, my friend who'd first sent me those horrifying screenshots, was a different story. He had always been envious, seething with resentment over my supposed success, a success he hadn't fully been capable of grasping. It occurred to me that he might feel some degree of satisfaction knowing that I was falling apart. The next day, my reflection was bolder, more assertive. It blinked, an action my own eyes didn't perform. It mimicked my movements, yet with unsettling, unnatural grace. It moved, opening and closing its mouth, forming words I couldn't quite hear. The voice in my head grew to a roar, filling my consciousness. My own memories, my own personality, started to shatter like a dropped mirror, scattering painful shards of me across the floor of my mind. The other one, the one from the mirror, the one from the grave, was pushing its way through. I slammed my fist against the mirror. The shattering sound was almost a relief. The reflection, unfazed, simply reformed, its smile widening in the fractured surface, its eyes burning with an unsettling gleam. It was no longer a reflection. It was a being, a prisoner yearning for escape, with me being its cage. From the shards, a single phrase emerged, sharp and clear from that other voice. "It's time." Cold air nipped at my skin, a stark contrast to the unsettling warmth that had clung to me all night. I woke to the chilling silence of my childhood home's backyard, the only sound the gentle rustle of leaves in the almost still night. Moonlight painted the scene in shades of silver and gray, illuminating a freshly dug grave, the earth still damp and disturbed. The tombstone was stark white, utterly blank, a silent testament to an emptiness that mirrored the hollow ache in my chest. My breath hitched. Through the large kitchen window, bathed in the warm glow of interior lights, I saw them. My family. Mom, Dad, little sister Sarah. They sat around the dinner table, engaged in their usual easy conversation, their faces illuminated in a comforting domestic scene. But something was wrong, terribly, terrifyingly wrong. There, sitting at the head of the table, was me. My own face, my own posture, my own everything. But it wasn't me. Not the me who stood shivering in the cold night air, watching my own life unfold from a terrifying distance. It was a perfect imitation, a chillingly accurate copy, yet fundamentally off. The way the light caught his eyes was subtly different. The set of his jaw a fraction too tight, his smile a little too wide, a little too unnerving. A whisper, cold as the grave behind me, snaked into my ear. "You were never supposed to wake up." The voice was familiar, yet alien, echoing in the space between my own thoughts. It felt like a slithering thing, entering my mind through some unseen fissure. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the encroaching quiet. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. Suddenly a memory surfaced, a hazy, fragmented image of a bustling hospital room, the smell of antiseptic sharp in my nostrils. A doctor's hushed words, something about a successful procedure, a near-fatal accident, and a long period of amnesia. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. The missing year, the blurred yearbook photo, the unsettling comments online, it all pointed to a single, terrifying conclusion. I had been replaced. They'd taken me, or rather the other me, and replaced me with a near-perfect copy, a doppelganger designed to fool everyone, including myself. And now, the original was back. A shadow detached itself from the darkness beneath the old oak tree. It was a dog, my childhood dog, Buster, but his usually playful eyes were clouded with a similar disconcerting unnaturalness. He stood transfixed, as if aware of this horrific scene, a silent witness to a dreadful family dinner that could not possibly be real. His low growl added to the unnerving atmosphere. Panic clawed at my throat. I felt a strange detachment, watching myself from a horrifying third-person perspective. The cold rationality of a bystander, instead of the terrified person who stood in the freezing ground. My legs moved on their own, carrying me towards the house, towards the table where I sat. This time, I could hear the sounds inside. My mother's soft laughter, the clinking of silverware, a familiar argument between my father and sister about the remote control. It's an echo of a reality where my presence should have been warm and embracing, now chilling and sinister. It began to hit me. This wasn't just a conspiracy theory. It wasn't a dream. This was real. This was my family, my life, but it was wrong, twisted, stolen. I reached out, brushing my fingers against the cool glass of the window. My reflection stared back at me, but it wasn't the reflection anymore. My reflection was looking back at me with my face, but their eyes weren't mine. They were cold, empty, and calculating. A predatory grin spread across their face. My family seemed oblivious, lost in their own reality, completely unaware of the other me standing outside. Behind me, a voice closer now, almost a growl, whispered words I now understood with a gut-wrenching clarity. He knows too much. Then, the shocking twist. I felt a cold press against my throat, a familiar sensation. My own hands, as if being controlled by an invisible, malevolent force, were constricting my windpipe. My vision swam. The last thing I saw was my reflection, my own face, smiling a chillingly triumphant smile, as darkness swallowed me whole. The grave, freshly dug and waiting patiently, seemed to anticipate a new arrival.